Well, the field is down to 27 teams competing in the postseason in our area. We'll break down all of our teams and their matchups as they head into round one of the playoffs. And it is officially rivalry week on View from the West podcast. Mitch, our alma maters are battling in round one. Are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready to get into it. The goal now, Greg, for these teams is to practice on Monday.
Well, we'll be podcasting next Monday. So who are we going to be talking about? That is the question. Let's go.
Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a View from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome into View from the West podcast. It is our playoff preview episode. Mitch, we broke down week 9 on Friday night and the instant reacts, but now it's all moving forward. We're talking playoff football. Can you believe that we've been through 9 weeks of high school football already?
Yeah, it's insane to think about. I tweeted that out before the kickoff on Friday that it seemed to go so quick, but an eventful week 9. There was a lot of things to shake out, a lot of conference championships to hand out. So it was nice to get some clarity there, crown some champions. And then obviously that kind of 24-hour, 48-hour stretch where the fields were set, all the qualifying teams were in. Obviously the great breakdown show that you were in on Saturday. So now we can see all 8 classes. We can see all the field as we always talk about. This is our favorite episode, one of our favorite episodes. So yeah, really excited to get talking about this tonight.
Well, Mitch, I'm not going to sing it, but you might say it's the most wonderful time of the year. That, of course, alluding to the video that we just posted on Twitter this week. Go check that out on our Twitter account. It is the most wonderful time of the year, and it's my new favorite tradition to do every year.
Yeah.
To edit some highlights to that song.
Yeah, you continue to do better than you did the previous year, and so kudos to you and thank you to you for putting that together. So seemed to be well received, and again, yeah, it's just such a cheerful time, right? So playoff football is here. It's our Christmas, so
yep,
yeah, this is a lot of fun.
I got to give a quick shout out to Nick Bull, because back when I worked with him, he was a photographer alongside with me. Loved shooting high school football with Dan Pearson and all of us at KWQC back in the day. And we had always joked about editing a video to that song every time it came to this time of year. And we never got around to doing it when we were working at the station. But now I finally made it happen. And it's great. It's like I said, it's my new favorite tradition.
Yeah.
So in the next hour and a half, whatever it takes, we're going to analyze the first round matchups from our local teams. We're going to talk a little bit about the brackets. We'll talk about teams to watch out for, everything you need to know heading into the IHSA playoffs and the 8-man high school football playoffs. If you want to go back and hear the details from week 9 and what played out in that last week of the regular season, of course, you can find that on the Instant Reacts podcast. Mitch, myself, plus the WQAD crew, we give you our thoughts on week 9. And Mitch, we've been getting requests to keep the Instant Reacts going. So,
here I was thinking that was our final hurrah for the season.
And I kind of thought it was too, but the fans are asking if we're going to keep going. So if you're I'm putting you on the spot here.
I'll have to think about it here. Certainly we have some Friday night games this week.
Yes. Yes.
That pretty much comes to an end though after this week, I think. So
I would think so.
I don't, and again, then you get into different times. There's games at 1, there's games at 2, there's games at night. So yeah, we might have to think about how we could do that. There's probably something we could do. Certainly as teams, whittle down, and certainly we hope that our pod of 27 teams, stays intact for as long as possible. They might be very short episodes moving along the next couple of weeks, but yeah, I bet there's something we could do.
Well, we've also been going live on Twitter while we're recording the Instant Reacts podcast.
That's such an easy, nice little feature that we could always do. Yeah.
So maybe we'll have to figure out a way to kind of incorporate those every week. But either way, we will continue to bring you content every single week. If you want to find the Instant Reacts podcast, you can head to viewfromthewest.podbean.com or just go to anywhere that you listen to a podcast. If you listen week by week, I'm sure you know where to go and know where to find it.
Yeah.
That was last Friday night. And then Saturday, Mitch, as you mentioned, I took the trip north to the land of the Northwest Upstate Illini. For the second year in a row, I was a panelist on the NUIC's football playoff preview show. It was awesome. It was a great night.
Yeah, it really was. Technical difficulties aside at the beginning. Yeah, you guys did a great job. It was such a nice show last year, and you guys exceeded expectations. This year, great presentation, great information. I think, and you have this in your notes, I think it is one of the most in-depth bracket preview shows. I didn't watch the other one, so I don't want to say that they talked more in depth on the small classes, but they talk about the bigger schools, and that's understandable. So it's a very prideful thing for us. That's why we do this show, and why Kyle has always run NUIC football, and why the panelists enjoy high school football as well. So yeah, a lot of pride, and I think it showed on Saturday night.
Yeah, I will give a ton of credit to Kyle Kampmeyer, Greg Pruitt, Kyle Leach, Tyler Murdian, who were all on that show with me. All those guys did their homework, and myself included. Yeah. I did some research too, not just from our local area, but we reached out to literally coaches, media members from around the state, from north, from far south, almost into Kentucky, where, way down in Southern Illinois, all the way up to Chicagoland. We were talking to coaches everywhere, talking to media members, trying to get the information that we wanted to know, because we want to be able to inform you. And Mitch, kind of on a side tangent, like the whole reason this podcast started was because every year I would get frustrated when I would watch the big shows, and they do a better job, I think, over the years. I think that as their coverage increases, they've done a better job of featuring big schools, small schools, everybody in between. Edgy Tim does a great job. Susie does a great job. They really do know the whole landscape. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you listen to their podcast, they don't have enough time to go into everything. So some of our smaller schools get shortchanged. And every year I just kept thinking, like, man, I wish that we got more coverage, more features on our area teams. And that led to this podcast. And so This time of year is what I really love, is that we get to spotlight our teams that are going to the playoffs, that have proven over the years to be good programs that make a good run. And we want to be there to highlight it.
Right. That's the thing, is that this area has had such success in so many championships under their belt. Right. So, this was a fantastic idea. I'm thankful that you had it every day and asked me to tag along with you. So, and the show, again, like you said, on Saturday was evident of that, of people who are like-minded. So, a great show. We're happy to be of service for people that are looking for that sort of same coverage for small schools. And we hope that they enjoy it. And, based on feedback that we heard, sounds like they did.
Yeah. So like we said, you can go find that show. It was on NUIC Football's YouTube channel. We have a link on our Twitter account that we tweeted out, or you could go to YouTube and search NUIC Football, and you'll find their most recent live episode. Kyle comes out with a weekly playoff preview round by round. He does every week during the regular season as well. He does great research, and he really dives into the numbers and gets the stats and compiles them, and just does a great job with tracking our teams, but then also teams from around the state that are going to end up competing against our teams in the postseason.
Yeah. And I I probably won't go back and compare his playoff projections to, his bracket projections as to what actually happened. But his knowledge of that and breaking down the classes and which teams are going to fall where, really impressive. Such a nice tool to be able to utilize and reference. So great job to Kyle once again for all of his hard work this year with putting in that show together.
I will say, I think he had 8-man nailed. I think he got everything in 8-man right. And for the rest of 1 through 3A, he was pretty darn close. I saw him scratching some lines off and then rewriting some things once the brackets became official, but he was pretty close.
Yeah.
And even if he's in the ballpark, I'm giving him huge credit because I'm relying on him. So
right. I have no idea how, I still don't know how, and we've talked to Kyle how many times about this. I still don't know how sometimes, bubble teams are placed in one way or another. Like Chicago Richards beating Chicago Ag Science is what pushed Athens to 2A. I have no idea how that works. So, I'm glad he knows.
I will say, listening to listening to Steve Soucy's podcast, I can't recommend that enough too. Friday Night Drive, they do a great job of covering the entire state. And the Seuss has become the bracketologist almost.
Oh, sure.
He's the Joe Lenardi of IHSA football, right?
Right.
And he did kind of break it down how that kind of worked because, once one team wins, they got to fit into 4A and then somebody's going down and somebody's going up, right? Because there's a deep team squeezed in the middle. So it was interesting to hear him talk about it. And he's been doing a ton of live coverage. Like he went live for like 6 hours on Friday night, just as results came in. It was kind of a fascinating watch because I'm kind of a nerd about the postseason projections. So
well, and that's the funny thing too, right? Is there could always be a game of what if, and there are a number of combinations where you could have seen Athens in 1A, you could have seen Sacred Heart Griffin in 3A, you could have seen all these different things. And so again, that's the science that I quite don't understand, and I'll probably rely on other people's expertise for the rest of my life. So again, thankful for that. As it is a science, it really is.
Yeah, but I was a communications major, not a math major, so here we are.
Right.
So yeah.
Nope.
Well, Mitch, we've ramped up our coverage like we've talked about. We'll continue to provide content throughout the postseason, all the way to championship games in Monmouth for the 8-man game and Champaign for the IHSA state championships. If you like what we're doing here, I really encourage you to support View from the West, support local high school athletics, support local high school football. You could go directly to paypal.me/viewfromwestpod. Again, paypal.me/viewfromwestpod. It's a direct link to donate to what we're doing here. And obviously, Mitch, we're not trying to get rich on it, but also, it's a labor of love for us. But, it is, there is time put into it. So anyway, even if he feels the need to support us, we would encourage that. We would love that.
Now, listen, I got an idea. And I'm going to get into it. I'm going to get into it later, but I've got an idea that I think makes a lot of sense for all parties involved. I'll get into it later.
Okay. That is a tease ahead in the broadcast business. I love it.
That's how we keep the listeners engaged.
I love it. All right. Well, quickly, before we get into all of it, I do want to take a minute to give a quick shout out to all of the reporters, all of the local media from around the state that have helped us out with some information for this podcast. Start with Charlie Ellerbrock from the Web Times in Ottawa, Illinois, my hometown paper. He does great work covering not just Marquette, but Ottawa and surrounding teams, Seneca, and, several other teams in that area. He helped us out with some information. We also had Chris Dewar, the sports director from down in Quincy from KHQA. We had Matt Shuckman and Don O'Brien from Muddy River Sports in Quincy. Darren Kennard from section618.com. He's way down in Southern Illinois, down by Carbondale. I knew him when I went to college down there, and I met him, got a hold of him every year. This time of year, get a hold of him. He always helps us out with information. Of course, our regulars, our usuals, Kevin Hieronymus from the Bureau County Republican, Terry Duckett, Cody Cutter, Jackson Storm, Drake Landsman, Matt Wheaton, Brian Stocking. We can't forget to thank him. Kyle Kampmeyer, of course, from NUIC football.
Jackson Stone. We're no edits here. Jackson Stone, not Stone.
Oh, you know what? You know why I said, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. So Jackson Storm is a character on the Cars movie, which my son is obsessed with.
Oh yeah, the Cars 3, yeah.
Yes, my son is obsessed with it. So that's my apologies.
Our apologies to Jackson Stone. Sorry. I wanted to say that excluded in that list is Matt Randazzo, and I don't want him to get upset if his name is not.
Here we go. We gotta always gotta cater to Dazzo.
Let's shout out the entire score crew. Corey, Dazzo, Camille, in addition to Stocking. So their work on Friday unparalleled for our area. So kudos always to them as well.
Absolutely. And to all the athletic directors and the variety of people that Mitch, runs into virtually on Twitter. Thank you so much. Mitch is scouring Twitter on a Friday night, and to the people who send us scores, tweet at us, do all the stuff. We love it. Thank you so much. Keep supporting us and, keep supporting your teams and spreading the, the news when they win or even when they don't win, just to get the information out there. We do really appreciate it. So,
Yep.
All right, Mitch, here we go. It's time to get into it. Like I said off the top, 27 teams remaining. A couple of our teams play each other in several matchups from our area, but one matchup is LTC showdown between Stark County and Rova Williamsfield. So that's our only conference matchup against each other. We'll get into all that, but I think we start in the Western Big Six, 4 teams in the postseason. And of course, we start with the champs, the 10 seed in Class 7A, the Moline Maroons. Mitch, tell me about their matchup this week in round number 1.
Yeah, so they'll be hosting the 23 seed, the DeKalb Barbs. This will be a Friday night game this Friday, 7 p.m. at Browning. The Barbs, they're out of the DuPage Valley Conference. They come in with a 6-3 record. Pretty good offense. A couple of dynamic players here. Talon Tate and Jamari Brown lead their offense. They've got a specialist named Ethan McCarter, who's had at least 4 punt returns this year for scores. Overall, the Barbs are a pretty battle-tested team. That's a tough conference. They played a tough schedule. They played 5 playoff teams. But also they've played 3 winless teams. So, the strength of schedule may not be as high as the Bears take almost a pick 6 back. This is a great night for the Bears. Not to get sidetracked, but
yeah. Side note, the Bears are playing really well right now as we record
they're
this.
Close. They're close to DeKalb. That's a segue. I will say in DeKalb's losses this year, teams found success on the ground, and always, if they were playing a team that featured a really good defense, they just seemed to struggle. And tell me that doesn't fit a Moline narrative and a path to victory for the Maroons.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you start looking at Moline's key to success, and we'll talk about it kind of on the flip side for Quincy down the road, but what Quincy struggled with was stopping the run, right? And that's what Moline did so well in their victory against them and so well all year long. Obviously, Riley Fuller leads the way, over 1,200 yards in Western Big Six games alone. So in conference play, that's what he was doing. He had, huge efforts this year. Jasper Ogburn, 125 yards receiving in week 9. So impressive output for a wide receiver from Moline. That's got to be a good sign heading into the postseason. But Mitch, give me the line. What I love, give some love for the offensive line here, because that's the line play that has been so impressive.
Right. Yeah, the big fellas up front from the Maroons have been just unbelievable all year. We've talked a lot about how good Riley Fuller is. Grant Sibley, Aubrey Threet, their whole offense, but maybe don't get as much love, or we don't give as much love for the O-line. But they paved the way this year, just under 3,000 yards of offense, 42 touchdowns. And Greg, this is the one. This is the big thing. Haven't allowed a sack.
I know. I read that too. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Have not allowed a sack in 8 games. They had one game, the Allman game was canceled, or a forfeit win. So they've only played 8 games. So when you look at Moline's numbers, you got to account for that too, right? I mean, it's impressive any way you look at it. 9, 8, doesn't matter. There are impressive numbers for Moline.
Yeah. And, this is a team, again, back-to-back Western Big Six championships. A heartbreaking playoff loss last year, if you remember that, Greg, to Willowbrook. A really tough game where they lost Matthew Bailey. I think it was right before halftime, and that just changed the nature of the game. So I expect Moline to be back here this year. I like their chances here against DeKalb. Obviously, we don't see that conference a lot. We don't know much about them. We can only go off of what we can see on paper. So, but what we do know is we know what Moline can do because we've seen them all year, and I like their chances here. And we'll be talking about the Maroons next week.
Yeah, I didn't realize that DeKalb was only 2-7 a year ago. But either way, when you look at DeKalb, that's a team that's gone up against Geneseo over the years. That's a team that's gone up against Sterling over the years. If you beat DeKalb, if you beat that DeKalb program, you've earned a win. That's a good win no matter how you slice it. So I think that Moline going into this one, this is a good first round matchup against a team in DeKalb that's been tested in their conference play. But man, Moline has answered the bell every outing this year. I mean, they've looked good even in their one loss, they've looked good. So
they've been battle tested. They play in the same conference as Naperville North, Naperville Central. So these, traditional, really good teams. So, but again, they also lost to both of those programs this year. So again, great season for the Barbs at 6-3, coming off a 2-7 season last year. But we know what Moline is going to bring to the table. As mentioned, what they do well is what the Barbs have struggled with in their losses this year. So once again, I expect the Maroons to have victory on Friday night and move into the second round.
Looking at the 7A bracket,
you
start with the number 1 top seed, Mount Carmel. They're 9-0.
Mm-hmm.
They're 9-0. They knocked off Loyola Academy this year, who we saw in our local area against United Township back in week 2. So that's an impressive win for obviously an impressive program in Mount Carmel. The other thing that stuck out to me in this 7A bracket was you got Pekin sitting at 9-0 as the number 3 seed. They were a team we saw back in, was it week 1 against Rock Island? Week 1 or week 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that was their week 1. Yeah, I think that was their week 1 game.
Yep. So there's a couple teams to watch for now. It would take a few rounds if Moline was going to meet up with Pekin, but the potential second round matchup for the Maroons would be Yorkville 8-1 at the 7th seed, or Libertyville at 5-4 at the 26th seed. Oh, you gotta love that 1 through 32 seeding, huh, Mitch?
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Geneseo game. Obviously,
yeah, we will. Yeah,
when you're talking about 7A, it's a little bit different because you're talking about mainly Chicago schools, so travel isn't as big of an issue. But yeah, looking through here, if I'm remembering right, I think Chicago St. Rita played in the championship game last year. They're sitting as a 12 seed, but 7-2. So I expect them to make another pretty good run. But Mount Carmel, the season that they've had, the seasons that they always have, right? Beating Loyola last week. I think they were the number 1 team in 8A. Got billed as game of the year after the fact. So this is a really, really good Mount Carmel team once again, and deservedly so the number 1 seed.
Yep. All right, Mitch, should we move into Class 6A?
Yeah, let's do it.
We got Chatham Glenwood hosting Quincy. Battle of 7-2 teams here. This will take place Friday at 7:30. And Mitch, you did some research and got some numbers on Chatham Glenwood. Give me the rundown on the Titans from Glenwood.
Yeah, the Titans of Glenwood out of the Central State 8, one of the state's premier conferences. We see a lot of teams in this playoffs coming out of that conference. So a great season here for Glenwood. Really good offense. Jack Knudsen, 1,600 yards passing and 21 TDs, only 4 interceptions. They've got some names here, Greg, and I don't want to.
Okay, go for this one.
I don't know that they're listening. I'm going to say it's Glahashki Blaze is a running back for them. 600 yards.
Yeah, that sounds good.
600 yards and 10 TDs in only 5 games of action. Tyson Randall, his highlights are really, really good from what I've seen. He's got 400 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. Miles Stapleton, another guy, 400 yards, 8 touchdowns. So a really, really dynamic offense. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball if they want to. I will say this because they did play Sacred Heart Griffin, who is the favorite in 4A. The Cyclones threw all over Glenwood. And like we just talked about with Moline, that kind of fits right into the wheelhouse for Quincy. I wrote in the notes here that this feels very similar to Quincy Rock Island. Obviously, a classic matchup last week where Quincy came back from 28 down. I feel like Glenwood has a QB who can throw. They've got some skill players at running back, and that's Rock Island to a T. So, again, just kind of going off of that note where Sacred Heart Griffin was able to throw all over the field. Can Braden Little do the same? That would be my key to how the Blue Devils can win.
Yeah, I mean, you start looking at what Quincy can do, and they really showed that in the win against Rock Island, right? I mean, backs against the wall, and they need to start making plays. And Rock Island's playing for their playoff lives at the time. And the Blue Devils, a young Blue Devil team, which we've talked about a lot this year, but that game really impressed me. because they didn't flinch. The Blue Devils continued to battle, and Braden Little at quarterback, over 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns in Western Big Six play. He's throwing for 254 yards per game. So,
and I think that number might be outdated. I think that was going into the Rock Island game, and he threw for 300. So, add that up to 1,800 yards just in Western Big Six games.
Yeah, and he's thrown to Gregory Quince, a name we've talked about a lot. He's over 500 yards with 7 touchdowns. Tykel Hammers has over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. And Brian Douglas continues to get the job done on the ground as well. 688 yards, 9 touchdowns. Are those numbers for conference play, I'm guessing?
I believe those are all from the Twitter handle Western Big Six Stats. So
yep. I
think those are a little outdated, just not including the Week 9 games. But yeah, only Western Big Six games. And the name that we didn't even mention there was Jarius Rice. Who had 5 touchdowns in Week 9. He's had a really, really good season, only a sophomore. So like you said, really, really young team, showed a lot of poise coming back from 28 down. So I think that that's going to be a pretty big element to this game, right? Is it going to be too much? Is the stage going to be too big for a young team coming off the game? Coming quickly, off the round, I would say no.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be my concern had that game not just happened.
You're right. And I was just sorry, I rudely tried to cut you off.
Okay.
But I would counter with, and I said it the other night on the podcast or on the show the other night. Sometimes I feel like these young teams that are a little bit younger that have success, that they play with nothing to lose, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't understand necessarily the gravity of this is my last high school game. The pressure's on because I want to perform right now. Sometimes when you're, sophomore, junior, you don't feel that same pressure. You just go out and you want to play a really good football game. Mm-hmm. And this Quincy team has continued to do that. Yeah, they impressed me. Mitch, we talked a lot about Glenwood's offense. Can we mention Brock Rogers on defense? 81 tackles this year, 17 of them for losses. So, and a pair of fumble recoveries to go with it. So,
so that's going to be
a player to watch on defense.
Right. Like we talked about in the Moline game, can the line hold up? Can they keep Braden Little clean, give him time to pass, open up holes for Douglas or for Rice, and keep him at bay? Because, like you said, the stats, 81 tackles, you see that, right? It certainly jumps out to you.
Yeah.
But the 17 tackles for loss is what really makes that impressive. So control him, control the line. You're going to have a good night.
Yep. Well, thank you to Matt Shuckman from Muddy River Sports. He hooked us up with some info on Chatham Glenwood, and he had some of the same insights that we kind of talked about here. He had brought up a lot of the athletes in the secondary, and being that Glenwood likes to throw the ball, does that work in Quincy's favor? So I think that's a lot of what we've discussed.
Yeah. And again, I think in the Rock Island game where you saw Rice have a really nice game, if the passing isn't working, or just to give the offense another look, right?
Yep.
We always talk about Braden Little and this passing attack. And then there's these running backs. Hey, don't forget about us. So it just gives the Blue Devils another dynamic. So if the pass game isn't working against Glenwood, can they go to the ground? Vice versa. If the ground game can't get going, how much success can they have through the air? So really intrigued by this one. I do think Glenwood is a good team, but I've been impressed with Quincy all year.
Yeah. And I think that, on the defensive side, like we kind of talked about a little bit here, I think that where Quincy struggled was to stop people running the ball defensively. Mm-hmm. But if that's not Glenwood's first go-to, maybe it does help them out a little bit that they can slow a team down that wants to pass the ball. So, maybe that all leads into their favor. And, we could see a Quincy Blue Devil win here for a young squad. Getting a playoff win would certainly be a momentum builder moving on, obviously, but down the road for next year and, for this program in general.
Right.
So, Mitch, let's take a look around. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say if they do win, they're probably looking at a matchup with the number 1 seed in the South, Lamont, who is 9-0. Good team as always down there. Yep. The team that I've been impressed with Well, I say this. Let me rephrase this. I still think the favorite in 6A is going to be East St. Louis.
Absolutely. They're sitting down at the bottom of the bracket. That's 6 seed. Yep.
Right. The team that I've been impressed with is Chicago Simeon, a traditional basketball powerhouse, but
yeah.
I've really seen them have impressive wins this year. So look for them to make a little bit of a run. Wakanda's the number 1 seed in the North bracket. A couple teams that we've seen, Grays Lake Central, who played against Geneseo earlier this year. They came in at a 12 seed at 6-3 on the year. So, yeah, a lot of good names here. But again, I think when we talk about maybe a north-south matchup, I'm probably looking at. Boy, now I'm on the spot and I put myself in a hole.
Put yourself on the spot.
Because I said no, I don't know. I think it'll be East St. Louis coming out of the South because I think that they're just so good, so talented. They were there last year and lost in that really classic of a state championship game last year.
Unbelievable. One of the best games I've ever seen, I think. Yeah. From
the North, give me Crystal Lake Prairie Ridge.
Yep. That's a good pick.
The 2 seed in the North.
Yep. That's a good pick. Mitch, what are your thoughts on Chicago Simeon calling themselves the Blue Machine? They're 9-0, so but that's kind of Newman, right?
It's certainly Newman. I don't know if they have the same sort of sideline chance, or I would imagine Newman still does that. I don't know. I haven't been on the sideline.
Mitch, do they still do it? Are you kidding me? I have so much video, and all you hear is that.
Yeah.
We are Blue Machine.
Good to know that still is alive.
You don't seem very interested in that. The fact that
it's a podcast. It's a podcast. No one can see my face. Yeah, like we said, it's such a basketball tradition school, right? So they can call themselves whatever they like, I suppose. So we'll see if they have the same success Newman has had in the state playoffs, right?
That's true. Well, we're talking about Newman, but we're going to pivot to Class 5A. And that's the Sterling Golden Warriors. They're the 5 seed at 7-2, hosting Arlington Heights St. Viator at 5-4. That game will be Saturday, 1 p.m. in Sterling. So St. Viator is at 5-4, like I said, from the East Suburban Catholic Conference, the Lions. Mitch, they got a quarterback with a familiar name. Actually, it's fitting because we just watched the Bears win on Monday night. So
yeah, we just watched his brother have a couple of catches tonight. Obviously, I watched him a lot as a Notre Dame fan. So yeah, Cooper Komet is the quarterback of the Lions. He's a sophomore there, and the younger brother of the Notre Dame grad and Chicago Bears tight end Cole Komet. So and obviously Cole Komet is an alum of Viator as well.
Yep.
So Viator kind of snuck in here. They were a Selection Saturday pick because they won during the day. A bit of an interesting note. They beat St. Patrick, who beat Sterling last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They beat St. Patrick on Saturday on a last-second field goal to get into the playoffs. So that's, there's not much better ways to secure a playoff spot than to do it on the final day in the final second. So a really cool kind of note for the Lions there. I'm going to be honest, have not been impressed with them. Lost every team with a winning record this year. And again, you were sitting at 4-4 and kind of snuck in against another 4-4 team to get in the playoffs. So I've just been so impressed with Sterling this year, right? They've played so well. They're such a dynamic team on both sides of the ball. I expect Sterling to win this pretty handily. If I'm being honest with you, again, just not being impressed with Viator this year, but being ultimately really, really impressed with Sterling's ground game and that stifling defense of theirs.
Yeah. So I saw Sterling last week against United Township wrap up their regular season. I was there for the first half before I took off and went to Morrison, Erie, Prophetstown. And, they got smacked in the mouth right away, opening kickoff. United Township elected to receive, and Corey Randall took the opening kickoff, ran it back 90 yards, whatever it was. right away. And we've talked about Corey Randall. He's a weapon for United Township. Immediately, it took, I think, 2 plays, and Cale Ryan got bounced out to the outside, raced down the sideline. No one's going to catch him. Impressive performance all the way around by Cale Ryan in this one. This is a kid that, we've been watching going back to when he was a sophomore before he got hurt, right? In that big game in the spring season against Moline.
Yeah.
So we've been impressed with him. Good to see him having this type of performance and having this type of, moment heading into the postseason. I think they're riding the momentum, but I think that a Coach Schlemmer-led team is always focused on the next game, right? So I think this Sterling team is focused right now on this game because they know how quickly you can get bounced out of the playoffs. You look a year ago and they hosted a home game against St. Patrick and we're out, so.
Yeah. And again, that St. Patrick team was pretty good, despite their record. I don't see that being the case this year with Viator. You're talking about Cale Ryan. I think he had 179 yards at half, and then ended with I think 350 all-purpose yards and 5 touchdowns. So yeah, a great start, great momentum to carry you into the playoffs. But they've been playing that way all year. Obviously, a couple blemishes, a heartbreaking loss to Moline, but those will harden you this time of year, right? So, looking forward to seeing Sterling at home on Saturday. Great environment for a playoff game. Going to be a lot of fun. I do think they will win, and we'll be talking about them next week.
I don't want to I know we're broadcasting this. I don't know who's going to listen from St. Viator. I don't want to give away any secrets, but talking to John Schlemmer and just kind of hearing what he said in different interviews, they want to try to utilize Cale Ryan and JP Schilling on the field at the same time. So it's just interesting to see. Obviously, both are athletes and, they can both run, they can both pass. How do you utilize both of them on the field at the same time? Does one split out? Do you make, go that slot receiver type? I'm interested to see come playoff time if they start putting stuff into the playbook that hasn't been seen yet.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right?
Absolutely.
It's an embarrassment of riches with the weapons that they have there in Sterling. So yeah, this is the time to do it, right? You can't hold anything back. These teams are going to get tape from you from all year. So what better time than to show something that you've never shown before? Maybe it's something you've been practicing since the summer, and just had in your back pocket. So I would be very interested to see what that looks like and how they would be able to utilize all their players on the field at one time. That'd be cool. Yep.
Well, let's look at the 5A bracket a little bit, especially up on this. I mean, not northern half. It's divided up, it is. Yeah, northern half.
5As,
yep. Northern half for the 5A bracket. I'm thinking optimistically, right, Mitch? I'm thinking long term that we'll eventually get to 1 through 32.
We're speaking it into existence, just subconsciously, we're speaking it into existence.
Absolutely. I'm fully on board with that. Well, looking at, like we've said, Sterling and St. Viator at 5 and 12 matchup. The winner of this game would get Chicago Good or Chicago Noble Pritzker. And Chicago Good is 8-1, the 4 seed, or 13 is the Noble Pritzker School at 5 and 4. Mm-hmm. Just looking at names alone, and I know that's very surface level. Man, I like the second round matchup if Sterling can survive and if Sterling can get by this one.
Yeah, the Chicago public schools are so tough to judge, right? It's tough to judge the different conferences that they play and the different opponents that they play. You could get a really good 8-1 Chicago Good team, and they might not be good at all. Not to say puns.
That's Mitch. That's a bad pun.
I'm looking at
that's a bad good pun.
Right. I'm looking at another team called the Chicago Bulls. So I just don't know what to expect here. So we could be talking about Sterling for a couple of weeks here if things play out right. Sycamore, the number 1 team here in the North.
Okay, so that's what I was going to get to. That's a former conference rival of Sterling.
Right.
That would be a huge rematch because I guarantee you there are a lot of people in Sterling that don't like Sycamore because they've played each other over the years and Sycamore has gotten the better end. I was there firsthand. I saw one of those games when Sterling was going in, riding a lot of momentum, and a Sycamore team beat them. So Yep.
Looking still in the north, you've got Oak Park Fenwick, who is the defending champion.
Good uniforms.
Great uniforms. I were they? Yeah, they were in 5A because they beat Kankakee. So, yeah, not sure if the 5-4 is indicative of how good they are. They got by Morgan Park. Speaking of Kankakee, they are the 6th seed in the South. I like them. They are very, very good team. They would have to play Peoria potentially in the second round.
That'd be a heck of a matchup.
That would be two really, really good offenses there. So, you see a traditional team like Morris sitting there playing LaSalle Peru in the 4-13 game. So, a Dunlop, a team that played a couple Western Big Six schools this year. So,
yep.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a name that stands out. Again, you see a lot of 5-4, 6-3 teams that I think are better than what that record would indicate. Better than maybe an 8-1 or 9-0 team. So, yeah, I think the path is there for Sterling to win not only Saturday, but again, like you said, maybe even a second round and potentially see Sycamore in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the path is there. There's potential there. I do got to give a quick shout out to, like you said, Morris and LaSalle Peru, but then also Ottawa High School. They're in there at a 5-4, 16 seed. They get in. I mean, it's been tough going for Ottawa over the years. They haven't always had the best program, for my hometown. So good to see Ottawa back in the playoffs there at a 5-4 record. All right, Mitch, we going down to 4A?
Yeah. I got some good teams here in 4A to talk about.
Yep, absolutely. We'll start 4A. Number 1 seed 9-0 Carterville goes up against the 16 seed Geneseo at 5-4. That's Saturday at 1 p.m. Mitch, we're talking the South bracket for one of our teams. How about that?
Yeah, real South. Real
South.
The Lions from Carterville, like you said, the number 1 seed 9-0 from the Southern Illinois River to River Conference. Really experienced team, strong on both sides of the ball. They really only had one close game. The last 7 weeks, they've outscored opponents 316-101. So, again, a really good team. Obviously at 9-0, two really good players on offense. Bryce Smith, just shy of 1,300 yards on the season, 1,500 touchdowns. The one guy that I did see on film that I really, really liked is Andrew Hellriegel. He's a dual threat QB, 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions on the year. So they take care of the ball. And again, that would be something that Geneseo might have to exploit if they want to have a chance to win here. And Greg, we teased this earlier because one thing that's kind of going against Geneseo, and this would be an example of a concern with doing 1 through 32 seating for the rest of the classes, is that this is a 5-hour trip for Geneseo. This is a haul.
Yeah.
Because this is down in your old neck of the woods, isn't it?
Yeah. So Carterville is only about 10 minutes outside of Carbondale. So they're right next to each other. And the TV station right down there is based in Carterville. So yeah, that unbelievable to me. Like, we've heard all year about how we, and I shouldn't say that everybody's been saying it. I think there's a lot of people in support of 1 through 32, but there are the people who speak out and say, no, we can't do this. It's too much travel. But here we are.
Right.
We have Geneseo going on a 5-hour trip to Carterville. Geneseo's in the South bracket going to Carterville. So my point is, the trip is happening anyway. So let's just.
I would think that it's rare, but yes, I get what you're saying. But I think it's rare.
Yeah, but we'll get into it a little more down the road. You want to talk about travel? 8-man football, because of out of necessity, they're traveling to their non-conference games every week. There's a team going somewhere. Sure. This past week, Milledgeville hosted St. Thomas More out of Champaign. That's basically traveling the length of the state, east to west.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, essentially pretty close. So my point is, 8-man's been doing it all year long out of necessity. we think that's one of the most exciting football, classes that we've covered because of the amount of, intriguing games. So my point is like, I don't know if I haven't talked to Polo or Milledgeville. I haven't asked them about their budgets or their numbers or what it's costing gas prices, but they're doing it. It's being done in the regular season at the 8-man level. I think there's other 11-man teams that have had to travel on the rare occasion this year because of non-conference games. Now this in the 4A, and I'm sure this isn't the only matchup. This is probably the longest trip. I'd be surprised if there was one that was longer because it's almost impossible, but it's happening anyway. So let's kind of, I don't know, let's face reality of what we're looking at here. We're already doing it. I don't know. I guess maybe it's a rare exception. Geneseo doesn't often go south. There was a chance that Sterling was going to go south. They didn't, but I don't know. It just kind of sticks in my craw that I'm going to hear that the people that say we can't do 1 through 32 when it's like, here we are with this matchup. So anyway.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Anyway.
Back to, this game. I think the Leafs are really going to have to play the best game they've played all year, really. This is a Carterville team that has scored 40 points plus in 6 of their last 7 games. A really, really good team defensively. Only one opponent all year broke 20 points. So, AJ Weller, Jaron Neal, Wenzero, the whole Geneseo team is really going to have to play at the highest level they've played all year to have a shot here. Not saying it can't happen. Crazy things happen. Crazy things happen when you play teams from that far south, right? What's the competition like? Not saying it's impossible, but I also think Carterville is a very good team, and I think Geneseo is going to have their hands full.
Here's what I think is important to point out. Geneseo only played one team all year that was smaller than them enrollment-wise, and that was Alleman.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, Carterville only played 2 teams that were bigger than them, and one of the teams was Murfreesboro, who is only about 50-ish, not even 50-ish students. So it's very close.
Okay.
So I think that Geneseo has been battle tested in the Big Six. That's why they joined the Western Big Six.
Yeah.
Geneseo joined the Big Six and they struggled the last few years, but now they're to that point where here's where it may pay dividends, right? They've been in this tough conference. They played a playoff team from 5A, 6A, and 7A.
Mm-hmm.
So you start looking at that.
Yeah,
that's an impressive resume. Now, they didn't win all those games, but I'm saying they've been battle tested. So I think that's something to watch out for. AJ Weller, Jaden Wadzerl, Jaron Neal, what Geneseo does on offense now. I think that if you could play your game, if you could utilize your athletes, I think there's a chance you could pull off an upset here for sure.
Yeah. Here's what I like the thought of Greg. That Geneseo white uniform on a Saturday afternoon, right? It's going to look, it's going to be great to see the Maple Leafs back in playoff football. From a uniform standpoint, this is going to look really good. Carterville is a traditional, even though when they're in Southern Illinois country, they are Illini blue and orange, same color scheme. Their helmet, that old school Illinois block lettering with the line underneath it. They use that, but it says Lions, so it's kind of a cool helmet. So this will look really good on the field, no doubt about it. But again, we're thrilled that Geneseo is back in the playoffs. Bit of a tough draw, both with the seed and with the travel. But as you mentioned, crazier things have happened.
Yeah, Carterville is a cool place to see a game. When I was down there covering games in college, went to several games in Carterville. It's one of those facilities that they love what they're doing there. It's a great facility. They love their football down there. And so it'll be a fun atmosphere with a Geneseo crowd that I'm sure will travel back to a playoff game. First playoff game since 2017. So for Geneseo, they're excited to be back. And I hope they travel well, I should say. Carterville will be a fun environment.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Breaking away from this game, did you see the stadium making the rounds on Twitter? I don't know what school it is, where it's just 2 sets of bleachers that go straight up a hill.
It's Mount Carmel, way down in Southern Illinois. So not the Chicago Mount Carmel,
Right.
but the downstate Mount Carmel. Yes, it's closer. It's Southern Illinois, but it's closer to St. Louis. So when I was down living in Southern Illinois, I was never in that area, in that part of the state exactly. But it looks amazing. Kyle Kampmeyer has it on his bucket list. He's talked about it a lot.
Yeah,
I think it's called the Snake Pit.
Okay. Yeah, if no one knows what we're talking. Yeah, if no one knows what we're talking about, it's like their stadium or their field sits in like a valley.
Yep.
And the stands, there are just, I believe it's all concrete, and it looks like a lot of people can fit there, but they're narrow, but really tall. So, and that's all of the seating that they have. So whether people are sitting on the hill or sitting all up the way up top, I've never seen anything like that before. So, yeah, Mount Carmel. If you search Mount Carmel football field, it'd probably be the first thing that popped up. So yeah, that was, I'd never seen that before. That was cool.
Yeah. I mean, it looks a little bit like home and away, maybe sit on the same side, reminiscent to Morrison, to your stomping grounds.
I would not want to sit in the front row there, because that walk back, I'd probably just try and take a nap and then finish whenever I woke up.
There you go. All right, we'll keep moving down in Class 4A. We have another 9-0 versus 5-4 matchup. Number 2 seed in 4A. There was a chance they were going to go 3A. Sacred Heart Griffin ends up in 4A. They go up against one of our maybe surprise playoff teams, a team that certainly didn't have the record last year, going into this year looking like they'd make the playoffs. Hall ends up at 5-4. And Mitch, this game will be Friday at 7 p.m. In Springfield, Sacred Heart Griffin. But Mitch, we got to talk about the efforts of Mac Resetich. What a job by him to lead the way for this Red Devil program, a proud Red Devil program. They have a history of winning state championships. It's been a long time ago, but to get them back here in the playoffs after a little bit of a downturn is huge. It's great.
Yeah, 1-8 last season. Obviously, they got a new, not a new coach. They brought an old coach back.
Yep.
Sorry, his name is
Randy
me at the moment. Right. Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, a wonderful turnaround for Hall, and obviously led by Mac Resetich, who has just been unbelievable all year. In week 9, he eclipsed 2,000 yards.
Feels like he's been playing that long at Hall, but
yeah, 2,000 yards in the season. I couldn't even begin to count how many touchdowns. I bet it's close to 30. And that's running, that's passing, that's receiving, that's punt returns, that's kick returns. He is Mr. Do It Everything. So much, in fact, and we'll talk about Sacred Heart Griffin in a second. Legendary coach Ken Leonard. I was just watching a video prior to us doing this. Was talking about how he thinks that Mac Resetich is, quote, the real deal, and, quote, one of the best players they've faced all year. And that is certainly high praise.
That's awesome.
I don't think he's blowing smoke either, because he's just been that special of a player this year. So he's going to have all the focus of the Cyclones on them for good, or on him for good reason. But yeah, to get the attention of a coach like that is certainly something special. So kudos to Mac Resetich on a great season, and hopefully a great game here on Friday night.
Yeah, well, let's run down some of the players to watch for the Cyclones.
Yeah.
And Mitch, there's a lot of them. And
I wrote all of them on the players to watch.
I know. There's a lot of them, and a lot of names that we learned a year ago. Mitch, both you and I were watching the live stream of Sacred Heart and Rochester in the state semifinals a year ago. A great game.
Yeah.
Sacred Heart Griffin quarterback Ty Lott, 4A first team All-State last year. Running back Richard Jackson, Maddox Morris at wide receiver, Keshawn Singleton, an Air Force commit. He made plays last year in that game. I remember hearing his name called out. And defensive lineman Kellen Wilson, a sophomore, but already getting Division I looks. He's invited to the Army All-American game. So just a really impressive resume. No surprise there when in terms of Sacred Heart Griffin.
Yeah. This will be their 20th consecutive playoff appearance.
Yeah.
They've got 5 titles. They've got 5 runner-ups. Again, I believe that's all under Ken Leonard. Legendary coach Ken Leonard says this is the best team he's ever had. And
that's crazy.
Incredibly high praise. They made it to the state championship game last year and lost to Joliet Catholic. I think, as you mentioned, those names were all on that team last year. So this is a really experienced team. And so if Coach Leonard is going to go out, he's going to have his best team with him in his mind. So they average 56 points per game. They've only allowed 79 all season. So I wrote in here, it's like Princeton, but on steroids, because that's what it feels like. It's just a much faster, stronger team than we've covered all year. So again, not to put Hall down much, but it's how good Sacred Heart always is, and certainly how good they are this year.
Yep. Well, you gotta go into a game like this and know that, rely on what has gotten you there. Mac Bracetich, obviously a big piece of it, but try to draw up any game plan you can that you think is that perfect game plan. Go in there, play as hard as you can, and see what happens. This would obviously be a monumental upset. Yeah. But hey, go in, play your heart out, do everything you can, leave it all on the field, all the cliches, but best of luck to Spring Valley Hall in this one. Either way, Mitch, Spring Valley Hall is a state champion.
Already winners.
Yes. Give us the rundown on that.
So here's the good news for Hall. It was announced, I thought that they were, and maybe they did. I thought that they were supposed to announce it on Saturday, but they tweeted it out tonight. So maybe they delayed it. I don't know. But Hall High School has won the IHSA state championship for best concession stand pork chop.
The Savory 16, right? They win it.
The winners of the Savory 16. We had a couple of teams in the running for this. Obviously, we're big advocates for anything related to a concession stand pork chop. So
absolutely.
Big thanks to the IHSA and to the Illinois Pork Producers Association for putting this on. And Greg, I teased this earlier, right?
Yeah.
When we were talking about sponsors and talking about supporting the podcast, as we say on the show, not a sponsor, but could be.
Yeah, it's exactly.
I can't think. Now, Arthur's is like my holy grail, right?
Okay.
But
okay, Arthur's, if you're listening, that's high praise, right?
Yeah.
You're our Arthur's top dog. Here we go.
Yeah, Arthur's not a sponsor, but could be. But also that's kind of regional, right? Or not regional, but kind of more specific, where it's like Sterling and Rock Island, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This is a podcast that covers Illinois, small school, small community, farm fresh football teams, right?
Absolutely.
What better combination of things could you think of than a podcast that covers that and the Illinois Pork Producers Association, right? That is a matchup made in heaven if I've ever heard of one. Every single team that we cover deals with Illinois pork in some way or fashion, right? I get so excited thinking about it, right? We could do so much with that. We could do, offensive line of the year. They could just, sponsor the show, whatever it is. But the marriage of this podcast in small school Illinois football and the Illinois Pork Producers Association is something I'm going to chase until they tell me no or until they tell me yes.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I believe like Kyle Kampmeyer and the NUIC football, they already joke about like the farm football that comes out of this part of the state, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
Right. See how I took marketing in college. How could I don't see how this could go wrong in any shape or fashion. So again, if Illinois Pork is listening, if not, I'm going to tag you on Twitter. Doesn't matter. I want this to happen. It makes sense. I will sell it to my best ability. Again, until they tell me no, or hopefully until they tell us yes.
Yes, I love it. All right, Mitch. Well, let's look around the rest of the Class 4A bracket. A team we've talked about a lot over the years, Richmond Burton, sits at the number 1 seed in the North at 9-0. But you also have Joliet Catholic at the 5 seed at 7-2. What else we got? Oh, interesting local matchup. Fairly local. Rochelle and Dixon, the 7 and the 10 seed. So old NUIC rivals, or not NUIC, NCIC rivals.
NCIC, yeah. That's right.
There you go. What else you see, Mitch, down the way here?
Yeah, you mentioned it in the North bracket. There's a lot of good teams. Like you said, Richmond Burton, Providence Catholic is up there. Joliet Catholic is up there. Wheaton St. Francis. So yeah, the North is pretty loaded. South, Carterville, as we talked about, playing Geneseo. A good matchup in the second round, whoever it is, with Coal City and Wood River, East Alton. You've got Rochester sitting there, and that's one thing that, talking about Sacred Heart Griffin, that's really interesting too, where they played last year in the semifinals. They played this year in the regular season. I think they always play in the regular season. I think they're in the same conference.
Yep.
And then played in the semifinals last year. That's the Leonard Bowl, and that is Ken Leonard against, I don't know his son's name.
Brian.
It's Jim. Brian Leonard. Okay. Who coaches at Rochester. So a father-son thing that happens annually, sometimes twice in the same season, could happen again. And this would be for the final time. So if both teams win their first 3 games, they would meet in the semifinals. So that'd be a really, really cool storyline there. But there's good teams in the South too. You are looking at Macomb at the 3 seed at 9-0.
That's a really interesting matchup. Macomb at 9-0 and Quincy Notre Dame at 5-4. That one stands out. Macomb's had a great season, one of their better seasons in a long time. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I was doing some notes on Macomb for the show. I think I read that Macomb has never won more than 10 games in a season. So
maybe,
yeah. This, and again, one of those teams that might not play the best competition. So Quincy Notre Dame could be sitting there with an opportunity. You know, crazier things have always happened. So if I had to guess, I'm taking Sacred Heart Griffin to win the whole thing. Would be cool to see Rochester in the semis. Would be a cool state final rematch with Joliet Catholic. So this 4A bracket is full of all the familiar names, heavy hitters in this one.
Well, and I was also looking at, when you look through the bracket, I believe that, Sterling, the team Sterling played Wheaton St. Francis. They lost to them 35-27 in a really good game. They sit there as the number 3 seed at 8-1. So certainly looking back on it, a game that that Sterling was in till the very end, and now turns out to be a very quality opponent at 8-1, that number 3 seed on the north side of the bracket. They play Marengo at 5-4 as the 14 seed. So, I think, you got to look at Rochester and Sacred Heart Griffin. They seem like they're on a crash course with each other. And then looking up on the other side of the bracket, like Joliet Catholic, Wheaton Academy, Richmond Burton, that's it's a lot of intrigue there in that Class 4A bracket as well.
It's all the familiar names, and somehow year in and year out, it seems like Joliet Catholic and Sacred Heart Griffin are always 2 of the last teams standing. So could be that way again this year.
Yeah. Well, when we speak about loaded brackets with a lot of talented teams, Mitch, let's get into Class 3A and the 3A North bracket. Now, it's a loaded bracket, and the top seed in that loaded bracket is the Princeton Tigers, sitting at 9-0. They host 16 seed Peatone at 5-4. That game will be Friday night, 6 p.m. What I love is, like, over the years when Princeton's really rose to prominence here, that's kind of been their calling card, is that Friday night playoff game. I've been to a couple of them. I love it. It's great. Like, certain teams you always know are going to choose Friday night to play their opening round game. Princeton's one of them. I love it. It's great.
I was surprised by the amount of Friday night games we have this year, but that's not a bad thing by any means.
I wonder if a part of it is officiating. I'm guessing.
Could be. Yeah.
I would speculate that, but Anyway, Mitch, tell me about Peatone.
Yeah, the Blue Devils from Peatone coming in at 5-4 out of the Illinois Central 8, another good conference. Really run heavy offense. When I was looking up these guys, reminds me of Forston, kind of a running back or a running offense by committee type of thing. Couple of guys, Dylan Soroka, Chase Riviera, and their quarterback is James Kuipers,
maybe
Kuypers, who runs the ball a lot too. So their 4 losses were all to playoff teams, so they've certainly been battle tested. All of their 5 wins, however, came teams under 500, so a weird balance there.
Yeah.
This is their 3rd consecutive playoff appearance. They lost in round 1 last year to a really good Reed Custer team. Lost in Hall in 2019 in round 1. So haven't been able to get past the first round in their recent history. Don't see it happening this year either.
No, I just, we'll talk about some other matchups down the road. I just can't imagine that Piatone has seen this level of talent that this Princeton team is going to, show up and play with. Tegan Davis leading the way, Augie Christensen, Danny Shihaki, just it's a well-oiled machine, right? At this point, I mean, Tegan Davis has hardly played into the second half of most games. So, and a lot of these players,
or hasn't needed to.
No, exactly, hasn't needed to. That's my point. Yeah. So, really impressed with what.
Yeah. Noah Laporte, another name to have another.
Absolutely, you're right. Good call.
Another big year for the Tigers. So, yeah, I expected the Tigers to do what they've done all year. Take control early under the lights there in Princeton. It'll be a fun atmosphere, and we'll be talking about them next week.
Yeah. Let's keep going down the rest of the bracket here. We'll have a lot to talk about on this 3A North bracket. There's just so much talent. But from our area, we also have Monmouth Roseville, the 12 seed. They go on the road to number 5, Stillman Valley, finishes the year at 8-1. They'll play Friday at 7:00. But Mitch, Stillman Valley, the Cardinals, finish at 8-1. They lost in week 9 to Genoa Kingston, a good team, a playoff team.
Yep.
Kind of a surprise, a little bit of an upset there in week 9.
Yeah, it was a final minutes type of loss. Genoa just stayed with them, and they had the ball last seemingly. Forreston got down to the 20, I think, tried a couple passes in the end zone, and Kingston was able to win. But that proved crucial here because that dropped Stillman Valley from undefeated to a 5 seed. And now they're probably, and again, no offense to Monmouth Roseville here, assuming that Stillman Valley wins, they're going to have to play, assuming they win, IC Catholic in the second round. Where if they hadn't lost to Genoa Kingston, they wouldn't have had to see an IC Catholic for a round or two.
What's also really interesting is that I think because of that loss by Stillman Valley, that's what put them on the same bracket line as Monmouth Roseville. Whereas Monmouth Roseville before was projected to play a rematch against IC Catholic like they did a year ago.
Right.
So I heard Jeremy Adolphson's interview on WRMJ, their pigskin playoff preview show, which I got to give a shout out to that. Ty Taylor, I was invited to be on their show, did a quick interview with him, and he did so many interviews. I mean, I think about 12 different head coaches from around the area, and really did, great research, really did great work. And honestly, on my drive back from, Dakota, from NUIC country, I was listening to all those interviews. So shout out to Ty Taylor and his coaches' interviews for keeping me entertained on the ride home. It was excellent. But in his talking to Jeremy Adolphson, the head coach of Monmouth Roseville, Jeremy said as much that we'll take our shot going up to Stillman Valley and seeing a different team. What we really didn't want to do is for 2 years in a row, go back to IC Catholic. You just want to see something different, right? You want to give your kids a different experience, try a different challenge. So,
yeah, and a challenge is what they'll face. They're going to get one. The Cardinals from the Big Northern, as you mentioned, 8-1. Big win week 1 against Byron. They beat the defending 3A state champs in a big conference game there. A wishbone option offense here, Greg. Really fun to watch.
Okay.
They only attempted 6 passes all year. That's what we like.
What? Are you serious?
What I saw. That's what we like. Not only that, on the defensive side, they allowed 7 or less points in 6 games this year. So this is just a really good program. 30th playoff appearance. They've got 5 state titles under their belt. And they, again, when you're running a flex bone, it's a little bit by committee. So running back Porter needs kind of their speedster back. He's got almost 700 yards, 9 touchdowns. Owen Zictus, just under 600 yards. Jory Spain is their big fullback, and I've watched enough Armed Forces football to know that the fullback is the key part of a wishbone.
Okay. Yep.
He's got great numbers on the year, 700 yards, 16 touchdowns. I haven't seen a lot of his name in recent game recaps. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't want to speculate at all, but when he plays, the offense is certainly clicking. And it's all led by Braden Engel under center, who is a really good runner as well. So again, there's your map. They're not going to pass. They're going to run. You know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Can you stop it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting matchup for Monmouth Roseville. And could Jeremy Adolphson get his guys in a position to know what they're going to do? But against an offense like this, it's like a Lee win, right? Where you know what they're going to do, but are you disciplined enough to know who's getting the ball and when, and following the ball carrier and making that play? And here's the other thing. You can't miss a tackle, right? You can't miss one tackle. You have to get them almost at point of contact.
Yeah.
That becomes critical in a game like this.
Yeah. The linebackers are really going to have to stay sharp, right? When you're talking about play actions, misdirections, things like that, you're going to have to stay on your assignments. If you've got an option and your man is the quarterback, don't, spread out and go to the running backs. The quarterback's just going to cut in. Only focus on your specific assignment. Even if the quarterback pitches the ball to a wide open running back, that is someone else's assignment, not yours. So just stick to your assignments. Try and slow this offense down as best you can. Unfortunately for the Titans, they're coming off of a 48-0 loss to Princeton. So now, granted, you're coming off of that loss, but you also saw an attack, a really, really good attack.
Absolutely.
That Stillman Valley's not going to mirror because they play a little bit differently, but big bodies, fast, physical. You saw it against Princeton. Can you take anything away from that game and apply it to this playoff game on Friday night?
And I start looking at, Monmouth Roseville on the offensive side of the ball, and I think we know what they can do, right? Silas Braun is a dynamic quarterback who has weapons around him. Can they devise a game plan? Can they jump on Stillman Valley? And not that Stillman Valley won't know what's coming. They'll get game film. They'll see what's coming. But can you maybe catch them off guard in the fact that Monmouth Roseville sits at that 5-4 record, right? The record's not impressive. Stillman Valley's come from a big Northern Conference where they've been tested. Not that anybody overlooks someone in the playoffs, but I don't know. You look at this and think maybe this is a chance where Monmouth Roseville has these weapons.
Yeah.
And it's a record that may keep them under the radar.
Yeah. And certainly is Stillman Valley vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Coming off of a loss, and especially in the last couple of minutes. So yeah, again, the map is there. Slow down their attack, play Titan offense, to the best that they have in the wins that they've had this year, and just stay to your assignment, stay disciplined, and see what can happen. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah. And I think, looking through Monmouth Roseville's schedule, you look at maybe the Orion win or, maybe early in the season, Kewanee or against Erie Prophetstown, but has Monmouth Roseville played their best, their perfect game yet? Maybe not. And if it's still hanging out there, man, there's a huge opportunity. Go to Stillman Valley, play a perfect football game, play your best game in this one. And I think that's where that you'll need to do it because it's a quality opponent in Stillman Valley, but that's what gives you the shot, to pull off the upset. Well, Mitch, we still have one more team in this 3A North bracket. It's a loaded 3A North bracket. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Dupec, the 7 seed, hosts number 10 seed Chicago Catalyst Maria at 6-3. That'll be Saturday at 1 p.m. Mitch, there was a chance that Dakota was going to slip to 2A. I think that would have been very beneficial for them.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. But I will say, looking at this matchup, this is a good round one matchup, right?
Yeah.
You look at a Chicago school. I don't know that they've seen the football that is played in the NUIC.
Yeah.
The track record indicates that that's an advantage for Dupec going into this one.
Yeah. No offense to the Wolves. I know nothing about this school. I don't know if it was like, if it's new. I don't have any idea. There's no, even on IHSA's historical past record, there's nothing in their like archives. So I don't know if this is a new program. I have no idea. But the Wolves, they play in Chicago Public, Red Central. Only one win against a team with a winning record, but they did average 30 points per game in the last 4 weeks. So maybe they are playing their best football here. But again, who are they playing? I don't think it's anyone in NUIC territory like Dupec is. So I think this will be a nice game for AJ Mulcahy. I think the Rivermen will take care of this one early and often, and potentially get into a second round matchup against a Reed Custer team. And I think that would be a really, really fun matchup.
Yeah. Well, Mitch, let's just get into this.
Yeah.
This 3A North bracket is just loaded. I mean, Princeton's the number 1 seed, which you've already talked about. You have Reed Custer, which you just referenced, at the number 2 seed. Seneca is sitting at a 3 seed. They're kind of the outlier. They're a surprise team here at 9-0. They were not a playoff team a year ago. So they're sitting at 9-0. They have the resume this year, right? They're 9-0. I don't know they've played the same impressive schedule that the other teams have in this rundown, because you have Byron at the 6th seed at 8-1. We have Stillman Valley at 8-1 as the 5 seed. And then we haven't even mentioned that small Catholic school from Elmhurst, IC Catholic, at 8-1.
Let me run down potential the final 8, the second round games, right?
Yep.
Princeton, Genoa Kingston, IC Catholic, Stillman Valley, Dupec, Seneca, and Byron.
Yeah.
Pick your favorite. Any one of those 8 teams could be a state champion.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about
Prairie Central. Yeah.
Let's talk about the South. Prairie Central, the top seed down there. They were the team that handled Mercer County in the middle of the season, or week 7 or whatever that was.
Handled everybody.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's fair. Handled everybody. You have Mount Carmel at 8-1.
Hey, there they are.
They're a team that made a deep playoff run a year ago. And then you also have Williamsville, who has made consistent deep playoff runs at the 3 seed, sitting at 8-1 as well. Mitch, I will admit, I'm a Class 1A guy. That's what I know best.
Right. But
this 3A bracket, I will not be able to turn this off. I will be watching these games every weekend. This is going to be great football. From my perspective, I would say I don't really know 6, 7, 8A. I know more of the smaller schools.
Yeah.
This is the best loaded field we have.
Yeah. I think really looking through it, I would say, like, I could probably guess 14 out of the 16 games, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about who or what those second round games are going to be, like, just unbelievable football that you could pick any one of the 16 teams that would make it in the second round, and you would have a legitimate case for them being a state champion because they're all just so good.
Yeah. You know what's crazy to me is every time I look through this 3A bracket and I see teams like Byron and Stillman Valley from the Big Northern, when I started high school, now keep in mind that's been 20 years ago, but I'm saying within
20, Greg, 20.
So I'm saying it's been slightly over 20 years now.
There you go.
but in that time, when I was in high school, Marquette was playing in the Big Northern. They are now the second smallest 11-man team. And there's teams like Byron and Stillman Valley.
When I was in high school, they were playing in the Big Rivers.
Yes. So it's been a slow trickle down. But my point being is that Like, holy cow. Like Marquette was going to get up against some real heavy hitters. And obviously the enrollment was a little bigger back then for Marquette, but it still is what it is. Anyway, just a funny little note.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think Mirko's opponent, Bloomington Central Catholic, has won state titles in 4 different classes. So yeah, you see that from time to time in private schools, Catholic schools, that they just, I think Newman's won in 3 different classes. So yeah, that happens. So
yep.
But yeah, this bracket is so much fun. And once every single weekend, you could flip a coin on who's going to win. So this will be exciting. This will be a really fun bracket.
Yeah,
probably. I'll still say 1A. I think will be more exciting. I think.
Okay.
But then this 3A would be like my ranked like second most watched bracket.
Yeah.
Most intriguing bracket.
I mean, as I mean, we've talked about them all year, but it's interesting that it's 3 different schools from 3 different conferences, right? The Northwest Upstate Illini, the track, and I'm sorry, yes. So 2 different conferences, the track and the Northwest Upstate Illini here in 3A.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it, man, it's Princeton, Monmouth, Roseville, Dupec, 3 teams, 3 programs that we really love covering.
Yeah.
Man, I hope the best for all of them in this bracket. And I think it's no secret in saying that probably the best shot to make the deepest run is Princeton, right? Maybe Dupec.
Yeah.
I mean, Dupec faces a tough challenge in round 2.
Yeah, Princeton wouldn't see potential. And Kingston would not be a walkover game. Or Elmwood Brimfield. They're a good team too. But again, just playing advocate here, Princeton wouldn't see IC Catholic till the quarterfinals. Dupec playing Reed Custer in round 2 would be a tough matchup. And then they'd have to either see probably a Seneca or a Byron in the quarterfinals. So again, could happen. These are all good teams that we're talking about. They're just facing other good teams. So again, anything could happen.
I guess my point is I want to see all of them do well. But man,
nobody thought Byron was going to beat IC Catholic last year, right?
You're right.
Nobody.
Exactly.
Nobody thought that. So it can happen. It happened in this class. So.
No, and so that was what I was going to say, is that based on what happened last year and looking down, you see that top seed in Princeton. Man, I want to be walking the sidelines in Champaign with those Princeton stripes on the field. Yeah. It would be amazing for Princeton.
Greg,
and for head coach Ryan Pearson, and for, I want to see it so bad.
Yeah. I teased you earlier that I didn't realize that they were playing in Champaign this year, and that's a much more manageable drive for me. So, let's make that happen, and I'll be there.
Yeah.
Remind me, who did Byron beat last year in the state game?
Byron beat. Oh man, that's a good question. You're catching me off guard here.
Was it Williamsville?
Yeah, it might have been.
Okay. I was just again, I was just curious.
No, Byron beat Tolono Unity a year ago.
Oh, that's right. Who is also a contender.
Yep.
So yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. This 3A bracket is so loaded. It's going to be fun. And, we got great teams in it, and I can't wait to see how it plays out.
Yep.
But Mitch, we're going to jump into 2A. Mercer County, the 5 seed, hosting the 12 seed Bloomington Central Catholic. Mercer County 7-2, Bloomington Central Catholic 6-3. This game will be Saturday at 2 p.m. at George Pratt Memorial Field.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch, I'll be honest, the Mercer County Golden Eagles come in with a ton of momentum.
Yeah.
But this is not exactly a great draw, if I'm being honest.
Right. It's not impossible. It's not at all. But
nope,
I have been impressed with Bloomington Central Catholic as well this year. The Saints out of the Illini Prairie, making their 31st playoff appearance, first playoff appearance since 2017. Their schedule is really heavy with 3A and 4A competition that sent 6 teams to playoffs. So This is a really, really good Saints team. Saw some film of them. They do have a common opponent with Mercer County in Prairie Central. We talked about them in 3A. Both teams had pretty similar results. So, the tale of the tape, I think, is going to be pretty fair here between both teams. But again, Bloomington having played a much, I don't want to say much tougher, but they've been playing bigger schools. Is that going to translate into this sort of game? Really like how Mercer County has played, really like how they finished the season. Obviously try champions there of the LTC. So yeah, this is a toss-up game for me. I think. Full disclosure, I texted you earlier that Mercer County was on upset alert.
Okay.
I want to keep that alert intact, but give me the Golden Eagles at home. Great place to play a playoff game.
Yeah, it's what always stands out to me every year when we start talking Mercer County in the playoffs is that they've had a great season. They're sitting at 7-2, but their wins are coming against a majority of 1A schools, right? Whereas Bloomington Central Catholic is playing a bigger schedule in the area they come from, especially with, the likes of Prairie Central. And so that worries me a little bit. Now, I will say that this year, a little bit different than some other years. I still think that Farmington win in week 1 is very significant here. Like when you start talking about, can Mercer County beat the good 2A schools? They beat Farmington. So they have that one on their resume. The question then becomes, how good was the Prairie Land this year?
Yeah.
I don't know if the Prairie Land was as good as they have been in years past.
Yeah.
Either way, Mercer County got that win in week 1.
Yeah. Again, I go back to the Prairie Central game where both Mercer County and Bloomington got handled pretty good. Mercer County responded to that by beating 2 playoff teams and shutting out both of them.
Yeah.
28-0 over Stark County, 43-0 over Anawan Wethersfield. That's what gives me a little bit of giving them the momentum in this game. The way that they have responded to that Prairie Central game, they saw the best, right? They saw the best in 3A. They came back, they beat 2 really good playoff teams. They lock up their conference championship, and now they're going into the playoffs, hosting a game and having the momentum. That's why, again, I think there is a possibility that this is a first-round upset, but I like Mercer County in this one.
Yep, fair enough. What is interesting is that Bloomington Central Catholic's head coach is a Westmer graduate. So Westmer High School out of Joy. So he has local ties. And obviously now that Westmer is consolidated with Aledo, he's kind of coming back to his, old stomping ground. Yeah. So he'll certainly have family connections there. But this is an interesting matchup. Like you said, in the fact that Bloomington Central Catholic is coming from a bigger conference, but this is not they've had a lot of success in years past, but it's their first playoff appearance since 2017. And I believe within a few years ago, they were 0-9. They went winless a few years ago. So they've been on a rebuild, and here they are at 6-3, potentially a dangerous 6-3 team.
Yeah.
But the pedigree hasn't been there necessarily the last few years. So
right. Yeah. Well, again, can't wait for Saturday. That's a great place to watch a playoff game. There was that picture we had last year of the Aledo Newman game that was so cool. So looking forward to maybe seeing a repeat of that.
Absolutely. Yes. George Pratt Memorial Field on a Friday night's great. On a Saturday afternoon is equally or more impressive.
Yep.
So if Mercer County comes away with the win, Mitch, they would potentially face Rock Ridge or Newman, who are right next to them in the bracket, which is really intriguing. So you have the 4 seed Rock Ridge at 8-1 against the 13 seed Newman 5-4. This is Saturday at 1:00. So this is a rivalry rematch of the regular season. We talked about Stark County and Roval Williamsfield. This is also a rematch. Rockridge got the win in week 2, 33-8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was when Newman, I think, was trying to find their offense identity, right? They went through a couple weeks where they got a couple wins, but maybe on the backs of their defense and their special teams. JJ Castle has really come on strong the last part of the season, Aiden Batten, being his main target. But there are, again, concerns about inconsistency with Newman. Coach LeMay in his first year at the helm, obviously great kudos to him for getting the Comets into the playoffs in his first year. But man, I've been so impressed with Rockridge all year.
Yeah, I think for me, when I look at this matchup, it comes down to, can Rockridge continue to click on offense with Deem at quarterback? It seems like that's where they're at moving forward. For the rest of this run this year, the Deem will be at quarterback, and he's really impressed me. I've said it on every podcast we've done for the past 2 weeks that he had never played quarterback before, and here he jumps in. And at first I thought, oh, they're going to be pretty one-dimensional, right? Like Deem doesn't know the playbook enough to throw, or they're not going to let him throw, or they're just going to rely on his feet, his legs. But man, they've really opened the playbook up. And Coach Graves told me, talking to him, that he has a big arm. Connor Deem has a big, strong arm. Mm-hmm. And what I was even more impressed with in the highlights, you saw him drop a touchdown pass that wasn't based on strength, but it was one of those passes, one of those kind of touch passes you had to put right in stride into the end zone, right? You had to just kind of float it in there, right in stride to Peyton Locke. I love that connection. If you have Connor Deem connecting with Peyton Locke, not to mention you have Cam Bonzak and you have Zarlatanis at running back or wide receiver. There's a lot of weapons for this Rockridge offense. I think the question becomes, can Newman slow them down, right? Because we talked about Newman's offense not really putting up enough points or not doing it consistently. Can they slow down Rockridge? That's the way they'll have to stay in the game.
Yeah, I mean, a Rockridge offense that scored 35 plus each of the last 4 weeks. So really playing good football here. I like the Rockets at home. Just again, I like the way that they've been playing, like the way their defense has been playing. So a good defense against maybe that, again, the Newman offense that's trying to find its identity is not going to be a good time for that. So I like Rockridge here. And again, potentially we could see a matchup of Rockridge and Mercer County, and how fun would that be in round 2?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That has happened one time, I think, since they left the Olympic conference and we're not playing together. It happened one time, but yeah, hey, like Jim Taylor says, hashtag bring back the Olympic. He would love it. Jim Taylor would be all about that second round matchup.
Oh yeah. Yep. No question.
All right. Let's keep talking other 2A football. Knoxville, the 7 seed. They will host Mendon Unity at 6-3. They're the 10 seed. That game will be Saturday, 1:00 at Dennis Larson Field in Knoxville. Mitch, Knoxville ends up as one of the tri-champions of the Lincoln Trail Conference.
Right.
They beat Mercer County early in the year, but then they fell to Anawan Weathersfield later in the season, but continued to get the job done. And here they are. They only had one loss in the conference play. So they end up as a co-conference, tri-conference champion. But they go up against a Mendon Unity team that's an interesting matchup at 6-3.
Yeah, this is a really interesting matchup with Mendon Unity Payson. A Payson team, the Mustangs, that upset Route Catholic in week 4. Route, a really, really good team that finished with 7 wins. So the Mustangs are going to come in with Riley Dukes at quarterback. He's been a really good player for them all year. They've got an honorable mention All-Stater linebacker and tailback in Brian Deeker. Probably the best player in the Western Illinois Valley Conference where they come from. So I think this will be a really good game. I'm excited to watch this on Saturday. Obviously, we've talked about Jackson Johnson all year. He's over 1,000 yards, 16 touchdowns on the ground. Bo Honeycutt, Will Shreves on defense, 4 interceptions. I think that's where this game's going to be won, is on defense. Just two really hard-nosed, ground and pound, smack in the mouth type of teams. But maybe it's Knoxville's deep threat, ability that might put them over the top. I don't know. This is another one of those games you could flip a coin and you could make a case for either one. Because I think the Mustangs are going to present a challenge to Knoxville, but Knoxville's going to be standing right there with a challenge right back.
Yeah. So obviously this Knoxville team is your, pretty standard for Knoxville. They're going to rely on the rushing game. Their main workhorse is Jackson Johnson. But Mitch, when you dive into the numbers here a little bit, Braden Downs, 300 yards receiving on 10 receptions. 10 receptions for 300 yards and 6 touchdowns. So when they want to go to the air, they have a weapon there and a connection there between Bo Honeycutt and Braden Downs that cannot be ignored. I think that if you get lulled to sleep with the rushing attack with Johnson, they're going to go over the top of you and they'll beat you that way. That's a really interesting, dangerous combination if they can play call it the right way against this Unity, Mended Unity team that hasn't seen all of their, hasn't seen them week in and week out.
Right. Looking at this game on the bracket, seeing where Knoxville would potentially go in the second round with a win, they might have to match up with either the second seed Bismarck Henning, Roseville Alvin at 9-0, or a Westville team who's traditionally made some deep runs, only at 5-4 this year, but which again, that would be a good matchup too with Bismarck. So this again, for me, it's a toss up here. I've liked what I've seen on tape for both teams, but again, that's what the playoffs are all about. You gotta play the games.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's look into this 2A bracket a little bit. You got to start at the top, the number one seed. The number one seed actually in the north part of the bracket, which sounds weird, is Maroa Forsyth.
Right.
They are normally on the southern half.
Yeah.
So they sneak up here into the north. Mitch, they've impressed me all year long. I think they have to be at the number one seed. They have to be one of the favorites to go to Champaign.
Yeah, I think so too. Look, what's interesting is looking down here in the south, because the favorite for me is St. Teresa out of Decatur.
Yep.
But they would have a very interesting matchup in week or round 2, either against White County or Athens. Again, nothing that I don't think St. Teresa can take care of, but St. Teresa lost last year to Nashville in the semifinals. I believe Nashville is somewhere.
That could be another semifinal matchup. Nashville and St. T could meet up again.
Yeah, Nashville 7-2 as the 11 seed, so that tells you that the depth of talent that's here.
Absolutely.
In this bracket. So yeah, we talk a lot about the 3A and all the teams that are there. I think you have that chance here in 2A too. You might not see that until maybe the quarters, get a couple rounds out of the way before you really see the Maroas taking on Knoxville or Wilmington, the defending champs, or we haven't even talked about them. So, or Tri-Valley Downs. So this is another loaded bracket here, I think.
Yeah, we cannot sleep on Wilmington is the 3 seed at 8-1. Their one loss is to Reed Custer, and it was a bad loss. They lost like 50-5.
Right.
But that being said, Reed Custer's maybe the top team in 3A, one of the top teams. Certainly Princeton, like we said, all the teams we've talked about.
Right.
They're a good program.
Yeah.
So you have Wilmington now falling down into 2A at 8-1. That's a dangerous team there. They're a team that has a lot of potential to make a deep run.
Yeah, like we have been saying, this is a really, really good bracket here. So if our team's here, if it's Rock Ridge or if it's Newman, Mercer County, Knoxville, whomever, if they can get to that second round, you're going to really start to see really good talent, really good teams coming up.
Yep. Well, Mitch, are you ready to start talking some Class 1A football?
Whew, hard to think we haven't even got there yet.
Well, here we are.
Yeah, the listeners that are still with us here. This is where it gets fun, I think.
Class 1A. We start with the top seed, I don't think it's any surprise. The number 1 seed, Lena Winslow, 9-0. They go up against the 16 seed, Chicago Richards at 5-4. This game will be Saturday, 2:00 at Lena Winslow. Mitch, you start looking, a Chicago public team coming to Lena Winslow. I just don't think
it's not going to go well.
I just don't think they've seen anything like what Lena Winslow is going to produce here.
No, it's not going to go well. They've got the 4th worst strength of schedule amongst the 1A field versus Lena's, who ranks first. So this one was important. We kind of mentioned it earlier that their win over Chicago Ag Science proved important because that's what pushed Athens into 2A, which Athens in 1A would have been a challenger, I think, to Lena's crown.
Yep.
But that did not happen. So wasn't an insignificant win there that was on Saturday too, on Selection Saturday. So, but again, one, you're coming out of Chicago Public. 2, you haven't had a very good schedule at all. 3, you're playing Lena at home. It's just not going to go well. It just isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to any Warrior fans out there who are not listening anyway. It's just not gonna go well.
What? Let's keep moving down the way to a bunch of people who are listening.
Move on.
Are listening to us. We will certainly talk about Lena Winslow plenty in the next few weeks. Yep. Let's talk about the 8-9 matchup, maybe the most interesting that we have.
I think so.
Because it's our teams going against each other, but it's 8 versus 9. Rova Williamsfield against number 9 Stark County, 5-4 versus 5-4. Mitch, we don't hardly ever see that, but here you go.
Right.
2 5-4 teams from the same conference have the chance to grab a win in the first round of the playoffs.
And their reward would be Lena Winslow.
Well, yeah, we didn't even get into that right away, but yes,
no.
It would be.
Yeah, let me put this on you here. This will be the first playoff game at Bill Adams Field since 2006, where Morrison defeated at then Alwood Rova.
Yep,
I was at this game. This was the year after me. This was I was in college. This was my first year at Ambrose, so this was
Mitch.
The team after
I
me.
was at this game. Did we go to this game together?
No,
I was at this game.
Okay, we would have met because I was working at TV6 by then.
Okay,
but no, I went to this game with friends. But anyway, so we were both there. So there's that. But I remember that Morrison team was really good. They beat Newman in round 1, which a Morrison-Newman playoff game is always going to be awesome.
I was at that game as well.
Okay. But I was at Ambrose with a couple people who went to Allwood, and Allwood was unbeaten, and they were just talking trash, like they're going to smoke you, or they're going to, telling that to me, they're going to smoke Morrison, all this and that. I'm like, they are not going to smoke Morrison. I'm telling you right now. And I remember going there. It was a great environment, It
was.
And it was a 49-0 Morrison win. So, that is a memory they would like to have erased here. So they'll have a chance to do it. So first playoff appearance in the short-lived Rova Williamsfield co-op, first appearance for Stark County since 2017. So we're bringing back these, traditional playoff teams here in a round 1 matchup. Really, really fun. They met in the regular season, obviously playing in the LTC. That was an RW win, 34-13. But these two teams have so much talent on the field that you could make a case that it could go the other way. This could be a Stark County win, no question.
Yeah, so you put in our notes, Riley Danner versus
Luke
Rewerts. I was blanking on his first name.
Yeah.
Riley Danner versus Luke Rewerts. This is part 2 of that, kind of quarterback showdown. Or I love it. You're right. It's absolutely, that's what it is. But there are a lot of weapons for both teams that surround those two players. I think what really impresses me about both of these squads is that at the 1A level, they have a lot of offensive options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for the Cougars, Riley Danner, over 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns. That was through the first 8 games of the season. Brian Burleshoffer, we've been talking about him all year. Jack Goodsell, they combined for 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns on the year. But I mean, just you name them: Jackson Sharp, Lewis Sams, Luke Nelson. They're all contributors on this team. Nelson and Sharp really good defensively, and we'll talk about the Stark County defense here in a second. That's where again this game is going to be won, right? which defense can stop the other's dynamic offense. On the Stark County side, on the Rebel side, Dan Keyser has 8 interceptions this year, Greg.
Yeah.
Three of them pick sixes.
Yeah, that's incredible. I saw the highlight from the game against Princeville in week 9. He had a one-handed grab in the end zone, brought it back 100 yards.
Yeah.
At the time, Stark County was only winning that game 14-12. So you talk about a flip in momentum. It was huge at the time.
Yep.
And that really sparked that victory.
Right. They were 4-4. So really that play, arguably got them into the playoffs. So
yeah.
On the Rebel side, as mentioned, Luke Rewerts, Keyser also plays on offense, Nolan Orwig. This is a really good offensive line with dynamic weapons built around it. So this will be fun. I don't even want to try and pick this one just because I think it'll be a really, really good game. I think Stark County will be ready to playing with some momentum. But again, the Cougars have a lot of weapons that that the Rebels will have to stop if they want to win.
Yep. And most importantly, after 9 weeks, we finally got Dan Keyser's name correct.
Right.
It's not.
Congrats to us.
Yeah. So apologies to Dan. We got your name right now. So Thanks, Coach Jade Nord, for texting me and telling me like, hey, these kids had a team meeting and all they want to do is get you to say their names right. So
they spend their precious free time listening to us just butcher their names. So
yeah. Good luck to both those teams. It's a great first round matchup.
It's cool that we're going to be talking about at least one of them for another week, right?
Yep.
When we can guarantee that a team is going to make the second round. Obviously, it's bad news for one team, but it's great news for another. So, cool to be talking about one of these teams for another week because they both deserve it. So we'll see who gets there.
And good to see playoff football back at Bill Adams Field.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, all right, let's move down to Fulton, the 4 seed, 7-2 against the 13 seed Aurora Christian at 5-4. Saturday, 2 p.m. Mitch, anytime you start talking about Aurora Christian in that 1A bracket, it's just a really interesting matchup because it's hard to scout with the opponents being so different. They've played bigger schools out of Chicagoland area, and there's no common opponents. It's really hard to gauge how this Aurora Christian team stacks up.
Well, let me answer that for you real quick. The Eagles have lost to Lena Winslow each of the last 3 postseasons in the first round. So they have not had good luck in round 1, not only being matched up with an NUIC school, but losing to them in pretty convincing fashion.
Last year was really surprising to me because it was like, I thought they had a pretty good resume coming in.
Yeah.
And then I saw that final score and I guess we knew that, Lena was that good and they proved it.
And again, it goes to the argument on when we do get Chicago area schools coming in, they're so hard to predict because we just don't know who they're playing. And if their wins are any good, or if their losses are really that bad. So in this case, Aurora Christian has not had any luck. I think they have a state title in their belt. I think maybe from like 2003 something. I could be
2-time state champions. They were 2011, 2012.
Okay. So I was correct, but also way off. But I don't expect anything different this year. Really, really have enjoyed watching Fulton. I think that the Eagles will find similar misfortune this year playing another NUIC team in the first round because again I've been so impressed with the Dykstras and the Damehoffs and everybody on the Steamers offense. Patrick Lower leading the team. I think this will be a Fulton win and they'll be moving on to round 2.
Yeah, when you start looking at the Eagles from Aurora Christian, Max Bray, quarterback, leads the way, dual threat athlete. I think he may become run first at times, but he does have wide receiver weapon Owen Hampton. They only have 6 seniors, so that they're a young group. They played a top 1A matchup in round one or in week 1 of the season against Ottawa Marquette. It was in Ottawa against Marquette. Marquette came away with the last second, literally in the last minute of the game, threw a touchdown pass to win 26-20. So Marquette came away with that one. In that game, Max Bray played well, but also went under pressure through 2 interceptions. So I think that's something to make note of, that he wants to try to be that athletic playmaker, but is prone to maybe throwing into pressure situations where it maybe is ill-advised. I think one thing to note, they have a big line. They have their linemen up front. They have 10 guys between the sizes of 225 and 315.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of size up front. Can that make a difference against a Fulton team?
Do they have a 6'6" wide receiver like Balin Damoff?
Well, that's the thing, is can Fulton manipulate that mismatch potentially? And I think there's a lot of potential there as well. I like this Fulton team because they can do multiple things on offense, right? Yeah. They can run, they can pass. They're not one-dimensional, to where a team like this, Aurora Christian's really going to have to play a sound defensive effort. You're going to have to be able to account for multiple things. And I just don't know that they've seen an offense that's been battle tested like Fulton has. And I think that Fulton could exploit that.
They've also never seen a golf cart disguised as a steamer roaring down the track after a score. So that's, I mean, you see that and you're just, what can you do? So Fulton, a great place to watch the game. We've talked before that we're always big fans of the big displays of playoff history. Fulton's got one. And again, the steamer just gives it that much more. If Jeff sends that out on Saturday, I am absolutely retweeting it every single time. So, excited to see Fulton playoff football once again.
Shout out to Jeff Parsons, athletic director of Fulton. They were watching our NUIC playoff preview at their party on Saturday. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. We love it.
Yep.
So, well, looking down the bracket in Class 1A, we have number 5, Anawan Wethersfield against number 12, Rockford Lutheran. Anawan Wethersfield sitting at a record of 7-2, and you have Rockford Lutheran at 5-4 coming into the 12 seed. This game will be Saturday in Kewanee at 1 p.m. Mitch, again, kind of like what we talked about with Mercer County, I don't know that I love this draw for Anawan Wethersfield. Rockford Lutheran comes out of the Big Northern Conference. Tough conference. They've been battle tested. They went toe-to-toe with Stillman Valley in this season, only lost 23-14. So still in a loss, but they still played really tough against a really solid 3A Stillman Valley. So,
well, and we talked about that with Rock Ridge, right? They one of their best wins was playing Princeton pretty close, and look where it got them. They went 8-1. So, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, because this is awesome. Their quarterback is named King Hughes. Is that how you would pronounce that?
I believe so. Yep.
Awesome. He's the leader of this Rockford Lutheran team. Not the sole reason, but a big reason why they beat a good program in Winnebago to clinch this playoff spot. So, again, not taking a whole lot of stock. They were 4-4, because again, playing in a bigger conference, but big fan of what Anawan Wethersfield has done this year. I'm worried a little bit that coming off of that loss last week. But I think they can regroup here. Hosting that, it's a nice place to play a playoff game, nice place to host a playoff game. But again, do they have the talent to overcome the experience of Rockford Lutheran?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that this Anawan Wethersfield team is still young. I mean, they last year they battled the 5-4 as a young program. I still think they're on the younger side of things. Now, Zeb Rashid, Dylan Ori have done a great job of getting this program to where they're at right now. And obviously, we can't forget to mention Matthew Sentney is the defensive player of the year in our area. I think, bar none, nobody else. He may be one of our players of the year, period. We have never gone a defensive route, but man, he has earned it. His numbers are incredible on the defensive side of the ball. So I think there's a lot of talent on this Anawan Wethersfield team. But again, it's like what we talk about with Mercer County. They haven't played the same type of schedule that Rockford Lutheran has. Now, Rockford Lutheran's record isn't that great. It's 5-4. But we'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, the Kewanee Wethersfield ended their season playing 4 straight playoff teams, right? Knoxville, Stark County, Rova, Williamsfield, and then Mercer County. So again, I did not see their 43-0 loss in week 9 coming. And certainly that's a blemish going into the playoffs. But they've certainly had a good schedule. They've certainly played playoff teams. And so now can they take that kind of experience and that 3-1 record against playoff teams and apply it against Rockford Lutheran here?
Yep. Well, move a few slots down in the bracket. We have the 7 seed St. Bede 7-2 against the number 10 seed Forreston at 5-4. This game will be at St. Bede Academy Saturday at 2:00. Mitch, this game, talk about a contrast in style and a contrast in schedules. Forreston played the tough 1A schedule of the NUIC. They kept in some close games against Fulton and Dupec, and then they stayed within 2 touchdowns of Lena Winslow, which I know you still lost the game, but it's Lena Winslow, and you held with them the whole game. That's an impressive performance, no matter how you look at it. On the flip side, St. Bede coming out of the Three Rivers, at least for this year, that may be changing, but St. Bede playing a bigger schedule. But have they been tested? They played bigger, 2A, 3A schools, but a lot of 3-4 win teams.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where the question becomes.
Yeah. And I think even on this show on Saturday, and even I think we probably talked about on the pod, there is not a 5-4 team I would want to play any less than Forreston.
Yeah.
This is a tough draw for St. Bede, I think, because I've just been so impressed with what Forreston does playing in that NUIC. And like you said, I was high on St. Bede, but again, maybe their resume was a little, light. I want to say I was impressed with how they beat Mendota in week 9. So that they get that win against a good offensive team in Mendota. So maybe that gives them some good prep against Forreston. But again, with Forreston, how they played all year, how they played against Lena, and the competition that they played, I like Forreston in this matchup to win. The St. Bede field is a tough place to play. I've been there, but Forreston will be ready.
Going to the academy, the Abbey at St. Bede.
I will say that the winner of this game probably gets Hope.
Yep.
Who I have my concerns about not being as good as they are, but others don't share that all that much. So, but the winner of this game will probably play them.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But Mitch, this is the battle of John versus Johnny. John Brady versus Johnny Kobler. I hate to bust your bubble here. I hate to kill all of your,
Switching my pick. I'm switching my pick.
So
Bruins by a lot.
Kyle on the show the other night said Johnny Kobler. So I feel like he would probably know.
Probably right, because there's not a second B in there, but I really had my hopes up. So again,
Forreston thought it sounded delicious.
I know. Forreston, if you're listening and you never corrected us, I'm sorry. Or maybe, I'm gonna have my fingers crossed that maybe Kyle was wrong, and it's just gonna live in my head forever that it's Kobler.
But it is an interesting matchup between, the leading rusher for Forreston and obviously John Brady, who's done a little bit of everything for St. Bede.
Yeah, who's a bit of a one-man show. Not to take anything away from what the Bruins have done, but Brady's stats back it up. Whereas Forreston is more of that committee type of success. So, can they just wear down the St. Bede defense, get into the end zone, and get out with a win? Yep.
Well, Mitch, we got 2 games left to talk about.
Yeah.
In the 1A bracket.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip down to Iroquois West and Dakota. So you have Iroquois West, the 6th seed at 7-2 against the number 11 seed Dakota at 5-4. Great year for Dakota, like we've talked about. Kyle Kampmeyer had them projected at 5 wins going into the season. I give him credit because I don't know that I knew that or was confident in that.
Right.
But he had it. I don't think he had them going about it the way they did, winning against Forreston and then losing to Eastland Pearl City. But either way, they get to 5 victories. They will be on the road Saturday, 1:30 in Gilman against Iroquois West. Credit to head coach Dan Sheets and this Dakota Indians program getting back to the playoffs, a proud program with a lot of tradition, like a lot of these NUIC schools, but it was a struggle. They were down, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and they're going to have to use that experience playing in the NUIC, playing that hard-nosed football here against Iroquois West, because this is a really run-heavy team, so something that Dakota has seen, but it might be the biggest line that they've seen. Anchored by Ken and Leonard, who is committed to Iowa, 6'9", 265. His brother, who also played for Iroquois West, plays at Illinois, so quite the family there. Jace Pankey is 6'4", 280 on the line. When you talk about their skill position, Sam McMillan doesn't pass a lot, but he's a really effective runner and an effective passer when they do choose to do that. But again, kind of like a Forreston type committee. Tristan Schacht. Yeah. Chase Ritzma, John Alden, and Christian Grayston all scored, I know, in their last week 9 game here. So this is a really, really good run offense. They won round 1 last year over United before falling to A-Town in round 2, which surprised me at the time, but they lost to A-Town. But more experience this year. So again, Dakota's going to be ready for it because they've seen similar teams in terms of style. Now they just have to put it all together on the road to get out of there with a win.
I think that's the key, right, for Dakota, is that they're going on the road and that inconsistency has been there throughout the year. When they've played well, boom, they're a great football team. That's what got them here. I think they need to play one of those good games and rely on what they've been through, the battle-tested NUIC football. Rely on that, and you're going up against a big line. But I almost feel like that's something that an NUIC football team can handle, right? That's what you're used to seeing.
Well, and we talked about how, or at least I kind of compared Iroquois West to Forreston, and Dakota beat Forreston. So play the way you did that week. Don't play the way you did the following week against EPC.
Sure.
And you'll walk away with a win. So yeah, excited to see this one again. Dakota in the playoffs is great to see. And as you mentioned, congrats to Coach Sheets and the whole Indian team there. So this will be a fun matchup, I think.
Yep. One more fun matchup to talk about in Class 1A. Mitch, it is officially rivalry week for the View from the West podcast. You're stretching out. You're getting ready to talk about this one.
Yeah.
It's my number 3 ranked seeded Ottawa Marquette Crusaders at 8-1, hosting the number 14 seed, your Morrison Mustangs at 5-4, Saturday, 1 p.m. at beautiful Gould Stadium in Ottawa, Illinois. Mitch, did you see this one coming? I did not. I did not see this coming.
Yeah. Obviously the Morrison playoff hopes came down to that week 9 win against Erie Prophetstown. So they took care of that pretty handily to get in. So no, I don't know that I had expectations on where they would land. I figured it would be a lower seed being 5-4, but this couldn't have worked out any better for us. This is the content we're looking for.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it so much. Mitch, I should have told you to bring your helmet in. I got my helmet here, so.
Hang on.
As Mitch runs down the hallway to go grab his Morrison Mustangs helmet. It's awesome.
There.
Here we go. We got to get them both in there.
Yeah.
I love it.
What I should have found is the newspaper clippings from when I played there my junior year, because that was the best game I ever played at that field. So I have good memories of playing there, and I hope the Mustangs do as well. But let me pose this to you.
Yep.
Because I know who we'll both pick, right? But I think you've seen both teams on the field, right?
I have.
So give me the keys to how Morrison can win. Give me the keys to how Ottawa can win. And then I'll tell you why Morrison's going to win.
Okay. First of all, don't ever call Marquette Ottawa. That's not how this works. It's Marquette.
Rivalry week. I don't care.
There's another school named Ottawa that's in the playoffs in a bigger class.
If you say so.
This is Marquette. So I will say
this is like the Rova kids getting mad at me all over again.
Well, it is. It's Rova Williamsfield, Mitch. You're forgetting a school here. All right. So what I will say, I've seen both teams. What I've been really impressed with, especially in the game I saw, was Marquette against Anawan Wethersfield. So, an easily comparable school to what Morrison sees. Morrison played Anawan Wethersfield in the 2019 playoffs, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, all very common opponents in the area. What impressed me that day was that obviously Anawan Wethersfield is now a playoff team. Marquette really shut them down, controlled their ground game on they did not do anything on offense. So, looking at a game against Morrison, what I like is that I think Marquette's experience on offense can grind down a Morrison team. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think Marquette is fast enough on the outside in the secondary that they can limit what Morrison wants to do. Morrison's a talented football team. They're young. They're going to be back again next year and the year after that. I think in this exact matchup, I think I like Marquette's experience, and they've been battle tested this year. A lot of years, Marquette's schedule in playing independent isn't always that tough. This year, I think it really is. They've played Aurora Christian and beat them. They lost to Hope on the road. They beat DMAC. So I like what I've seen in Marquette in this matchup.
Okay. Now let me tell you why you're wrong. I've been really impressed with Morrison all year, right? They were 2-7 last year.
Yep.
This is Coach Schneider's first real full season with them, a full off season coming into the new year.
Absolutely.
Young team, 4 seniors. They play freshmen on this team. They play sophomores on this team. What I've liked the most, in addition to seeing how good quarterback Danny Mao has been, having that connection with Chase Newman, Mao's over 1,000 yards. That's kind of a rarity for Morrison quarterbacks.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I can remember off the top of my head, but I don't think in their 2 state championships.
No, they were run heavy those years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of them might have been, but regardless, it's rare to have 1,000. So Chase Newman obviously being the top target, Carson Strating, Deshaun McQueen, Brady Anderson. That's a 4x1 team if I've ever seen one that you'll probably see in the spring. Truth be told, you'll probably see that in the spring. What I've liked most is that this team started 2-4.
Yeah.
And their playoffs started 3 weeks ago. And they hit the mark every single week. I don't remember who they won their third win was. I don't remember. Hall. It was Hall.
Yep.
And then they beat Leroy, and then they beat Erie Prophetstown. So I think that Morrison's momentum will be their biggest catalyst in this game against, like you said, Ottawa's experience, Ottawa's talent, Ottawa's speed.
Marquette.
What did I say? Did I say Ottawa again?
Yeah.
Whatever. I think that the way that Morrison has been playing will push them over Marquette in this game. That's how I see it. And we will see Saturday, 1 p.m. at the field there. That's a weird place to play because you got to come down the hill to get to the field, right? Because the locker rooms still like way up on a hill?
Well, they have, so the school is up on the hill. So they kind of get prepared. I think at halftime you end up going to either there's like
I think we went like
building.
Behind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I remember after the game, because it was like a muggy, like August night.
Yes.
And like, you're just like exhausted. And not only do you have to walk across, I think it's like a field or a parking field, right?
Yeah, the practice field, and then you go up the hill. Yep.
And then you got to walk up this hill in your cleats. So that was an interesting game. But
so you said the word weird. That's a weird way to say beautiful place to play at Gould Stadium.
I played at night. Couldn't tell you. I'll take your word for it.
No,
I'll take your word for it.
It is. I mean, I know I'm biased, but there is not many places you see that have that amount of bleachers on both sides for home and visitors. There's a ton of bleacher space, but also there's plenty of space for. Go ahead.
Is there a track there?
No, they don't have track. Nope.
Right.
Not around the field. Nope.
The bleachers, the away bleachers at least, are like right there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right on. I mean, it's your supporters, but they're like right on top of you.
Yeah. But I think that adds to the atmosphere. I think it makes it it makes it feel a little bigger. Yeah. And I will say they have the best public address announcers in the state. My dad being one of them.
There's no doubt about that. And look, in all seriousness, this couldn't have worked out better for this podcast.
Yeah.
Biases aside, I like both of these teams. I think this will be a really fun matchup.
Yeah, I do too. And yes, I will compliment Morrison, as I've talked about Marquette a lot. I will compliment Morrison the fact that Brady Anderson as a freshman really impresses me. So I don't know if you saw the highlights from the other night. I hate to even like call it out because
I will. It was such a good play from Jace Grunder. Like it was such a nice run.
Yes.
And it only fell apart at the very last yard from the effort of Anderson.
Yes, exactly. The reason I had to show the play was because you see Anderson come from out of nowhere, full sprint, and you could tell his whole objective was he was going to try to punch that ball out, and it worked perfectly for him. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He caught up from 15 yards back, punched it out. It became a turnover into the end zone. Morrison gets the ball back. It was a huge momentum swing at the time. Yeah,
and I said on the instant reacts that he comes from a long line of speed. His dad, Nate Anderson, who I believe follows us on Twitter. He's a Morrison grad. He's also an Ambrose grad, and he was the secondaries coach when I played. So I've known that family for a long time. His Brady's two older brothers were both state medalists at the track meet, and you can see why. You can see why he probably will be one too. So the Anderson family of Morrison has always had speed. So cool to see that line still continues and still making big plays.
Mitch, the question is, do you know the Morrison fight song, the words, all that?
No. Is there one?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking you. Is there one?
It's the Big Red Rumble was always the cheer. I don't think there's a fight song. If there is, well, I'm a bad alum because I don't know it.
Okay, well, here's what's gonna happen. The loser will sing the other team's fight song, or will do some sort of cheer or chant, or
all right.
You figure it out. You figure out what it needs to be. But
does Ottawa Marquette have a?
Oh yeah, I know all the words, and I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay. See, if I look up Morrison Big Red Rumble, all I get is results from the latest WWE Royal Rumble. So that is not helpful whatsoever, and it's just pictures of John Morrison. So not helpful in the slightest.
Well, it's close then, John Morrison. Yeah. You're close, but
yeah, right.
All right. Well, get familiar with MMMARQQQUEETTE Marquette.
Is that the Ottawa High School fight song?
You know what, Mitch? I'm done. I'm done with this. You know,
I'm not going to be singing it. So what's it matter if I learn it? So go first.
Oh, you'll see. You'll see. You better get real used to hearing that.
Yeah,
All right.
Not even going to prepare.
I love
Let's get to 8-man. We've been talking for 2.5 hours. Let's get to 8-man.
Well, do we want to talk about any of the brackets?
We got to go through the best bracket there is. My goodness.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about what we have in the Class 1A playoffs here?
Well, what we kind of missed in all of that was that a lot of these games they make up most of the North bracket. So
yeah,
a lot of these teams are going to be playing each other in the second round. So
absolutely,
Lena will be playing Roval Williams for Stark County. Fulton could potentially be playing Kewanee and Weathersfield.
Yep.
I guess that's if things went well, Ottawa, Marquette, or Morrison could be playing Dakota. So there's a lot of possibilities that all of these teams are going to be in the second round. So that'll be cool.
And I think you mentioned Chicago Hope Academy. They're sitting at 9-0 at the number 2 seed. I was fairly impressed with their score against Marquette, being that I think Marquette has a good defense, and Chicago Hope really put up a big point total on them. I think they scored 40-some points. So that did impress me. But you're right. You pointed out their resume is not that strong overall.
Yeah, my concern about Hope is that they're 9-0. Again, independent, like you were talking about with Ottawa Marquette, and you can't always have a good picture of how their opponents are. NUIC Kyle posted strength of schedules for the 1A class, and they come in at 13th of the Northern bracket. So again, that just kind of gives more fuel to my argument that I'm not as high on them as others are, especially if their round 2 game is going to be against, I think, Forreston, but also against St. Bede. That could potentially win that game. No question in my mind.
Yeah, you look at their opponent's win-loss record this season, 23-55 for Chicago.
Oof.
Yeah. Now that being said, I was impressed with them when they played Marquette, because Marquette had just come off a big victory over Anawan Weathersfield, where Marquette's defense really silenced that Titan offense. But then the following week, Hope looked really good offensively. So I was impressed with that victory. But looking at that, that's hard to justify. 23-55.
Right.
And their strength of schedule is just not there. So that will be interesting to follow along with. The other thing I think you have to look at when you start looking at this Class 1A bracket is that a year ago, Ridgeview Lexington was in the North, and they met up with Lena Winslow in the semifinal. And that semifinal game, Mitch, if you remember, was much closer than what the state championship game ended up being.
Right.
And now that Ridgeview Lexington team falls south this year. They're the top team in the South. You're almost on a crash course for Lena Winslow and Ridgeview Lexington rematch. Yeah,
you could see it happening. Looking at the South, there's a lot of good teams down here too, though. So obviously Ridgeview has been ranked number 2 all year. You've got Tuscola there. You've got Route, who we've been impressed with.
Yep.
Camp Point Central 9-0, a team that always makes it far. Moequa Central A&M is right there at 6-3. Greenfield Northwestern, Cumberland. So the South is full of really good teams too. So they're going to beat each other up on the way to the semifinals and eventually get to who I think it will be, Lena Winslow. But looking at this and looking at teams that are in the same conferences, rematches, all that, it reminds me of, and I think I told you this, I was looking at the 1999 2A bracket.
Yeah.
Where it was out of I don't remember if they called it Three Rivers back then or the present day track, where you had Newman, Morrison, and Fulton. Newman was the number 1 seed in 2A by far. Morrison was really good, and Fulton made the playoffs too. I think Fulton came in at 5-4. Newman, the number 1 overall seed, got destroyed in round 1. Morrison won their first round matchup pretty handily against GCMS before they lost to Aledo pretty badly. And then you had Fulton, who lost to both Morrison and Newman in the regular season, made it all the way to the state semifinals. So anything can happen when you get a number of good teams from the same conference. Throw out what happened in the regular season. We talked about this already with Stark County. in Rockridge Newman. Throw out really what happened, because this is a brand new season. It's a brand new ball game. Anything can happen. So is it feasible that Lena makes it to the quarters and plays Fulton, and that's a tough game? Yeah, it's completely feasible. Is it feasible that they make it to the semifinals and play Forreston? Yes, it absolutely is. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if that means Lena wouldn't win those games or even win them pretty handily. But this 1A bracket sets up a lot of opportunities like that, where you're going to see rematches. You're going to see really good teams every single round. And even though it looks like Lena is on just an easy path, I don't think it'll be quite as easy as we think it is. Not saying it's not going to happen, because I still think it will. But again, you get to a quarterfinal game against Fulton, and then you maybe start to rethink it a little bit.
Hey, what about that semifinal game against Ottawa Marquette?
Did that happen in a previous year, or should I look back? Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm saying it's not impossible.
I will say the winner of that game, the winner of Ottawa Marquette Morrison, I think has a good shot to beat Iroquois West or Dakota and would be a quarterfinal team.
Yep. And then you start, then you start looking at, that Forreston matchup down the way, and there's Chicago Hope, which Marquette would have to overcome. That's been beaten by once before. So right
now, this and talking with seeing Ridgeview Lexington in the South, this would be an argument almost like for the 1 through 32 seeding, because then you would see the top seed and the second seed in different brackets, and you wouldn't see them play within the first 3 rounds. So this would be, an advocate of what could happen if you saw an unbeaten Ridgeview team and an unbeaten Lena team, the top 2 teams in 1A all year meeting in the state championship.
Yeah. I think it seems like Ridgeview Lexington and maybe Camp Point Central are on kind of a collision course there in the South.
Again, and we were just talking about with Hope, Camp Point Central and Greenfield Northwestern have worse strength of schedule. So again, true. anything's going to happen. You could see Central A&M at 6-3 and the 10 seed get out of there. It's just, we liked Route as the 5 seed. Tuscola has been I've really been impressed with Tuscola this year at 7-2. So this will be a lot of fun. As much fun in the star power that we had in 3A, 1A I think clips it just a little bit, and we'll see good matchups every single game of this playoff.
Yeah. Well, we're going to transition to 8-man, and that's a good transition point because there are exciting matchups every week in 8-man football.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun. Let's get into it. Mitch, let's talk about the teams from our area, but essentially it's almost every game that we're going to end up talking about here. The number 2 seed, Biggsville West Central against number 15 seed South Beloit. That one's Friday at 7:00. You have Cambridge, Ridgewood, number 3 seed against number 14 seed South Fork. That's also Friday at 7:00. Ashton Franklin Center going up against Milford Sisna Park, who we've been really impressed with. That's the 4-13 matchup. That one will be on Saturday at 2:00. Amboy is the 5 seed against 12 seed Blue Ridge Farmer City, Saturday, 3:00. Polo, the 2-time defending state champions, comes in as the 6 seed against Hiawatha. Another team we've been huge high on this year, number 7 Milledgeville against number 10 Sauda West Prairie, Saturday at 1:00. So many big matchups here. I mean, Mitch, we'll start with Biggsville West Central. They're the number 2 seed, led by Jason Kirby. They're undefeated on the season. They have really impressed me this year. Caden Drosty is just doing work. I mean, he's been so impressive. Him, Parker Meldrum on the defensive side of the ball, Mason Carnes, I believe, also doing great. This Biggsville West Central team is probably one of the favorites to win the 8-man state title, I would say.
I would think so. Yeah. Obviously Dakota Lutheran has that number 1 seed, and they've
Decatur Lutheran, but yes.
What did I say?
Dakota Lutheran.
Oh,
there's no Lutheran school in Dakota that I know of, but
it's 1:20 in the morning, Greg. Yeah, I've been impressed with West Central. Who can stop them, right? Because who did they play in week 9? Did they play Milledgeville or Amboy?
Week 9 they played Amboy, beat them pretty soundly. Yep.
Yeah. So a really good Amboy team. And it was one of those things where you almost like expected West Central to do that, but it still seems weird, right? It still seems that they shouldn't have been able to do that against Amboy. So they are my favorite too, I think, over Decatur Lutheran. But as we've talked about all year, every single week, if you tell me that AFC is going to beat Milford Citizen Park on Saturday, yep, I believe that. I believe that all day. Some games, I in this, at least in this first round, I think Ridgewood wins, Amboy wins, Polo wins, West Prairie Milledgeville. I think that's going to be a good game. I like Milledgeville though with the returning players that they have.
Yeah.
Pawnee, St. Thomas More, flip a coin. So,
yep,
maybe not this first round, but the second round, it gets into games where you can make a case for any team. Doesn't matter if they played in the regular season. Doesn't matter what the result was. That I could be convinced that they're going to win, and that you probably have 4 teams, I think, that could win the title.
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Decatur Lutheran, West Central, Milford Citizen Park, and then I'll put Polo in there because I've really been impressed with what Polo has done. And that's not even mentioning the other however many teams are the other 14 teams that I didn't mention. So this will be a lot of fun. This will be the 3A, the 1A type of bracket, type of week after week entertainment, I think.
Yeah, I think obviously, one of the question marks becomes, Tucker Lindenmeyer from Amboy.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if he's been out the last few weeks, we certainly hope he's healthy. We don't want anyone to rush back, but we hope
who did they beat to get to number 1 when he was playing? Because was it Milledgeville?
Yes.
Did that push them to number 1? Okay.
Yep, they beat Milledgeville 40-36 in week 3.
Great, unreal game. Great game.
Yeah, it's a great win for them. I mean, their only losses are to Milford Citizen Park, who's one of the top teams, and to Biggsville West Central in week 9.
Yeah,
I mean, they have an impressive resume. Milledgeville has an impressive resume. Not to mention that Bryce Audie is back for them now, who is one of their difference makers.
Do you have, and I don't want to have you make you search for it, especially live here. Do you have what, I can find it. I wonder what West Central's closest game was.
I can tell you real quick here. West Central's closest game was 64-36.
Sure.
Or 66-34 against Ridgewood. The game against Ridgewood or Milledgeville, those would be the closest games they had, and they weren't even really that close. So
yeah, the lowest amount of points they put up this year was 50.
Yep.
And that was against one of the worst teams they played in FCW. So
yeah. And it was 50-8, and that was one of the lowest points they've given up this year. So
556 points for West Central this year, just insane. So yeah,
I think
they're my favorite. They're so good. They're so fast. Milford Citizen Park went to the state title the first year, right, against Polo.
Correct.
And then it was Polo Orangeville.
Yep.
So I think that, again, I've been really impressed with Polo this year. Not saying they can't get back to the title game, but maybe for the first time we have 2 completely new teams to the state championship here in A-Man. That'd be fun.
It could be. And I know that the group that I was with on our NUIC playoff preview show, Tyler Murdian was a quarterback on that team a year ago from Polo. So he's high on Polo, and for good reason. I think that they're a team that they've played an impressive resume too, and they come here at the 6th seed, but man, they have all the experience and all of the potential to make that run, right?
All the yards, all the touchdowns with
Soltau and Grenoble.
Because who did they lose to? Who were their 2 losses?
So Polo has lost to They lost to Amboy in week 1, and they lost to Milledgeville in week 4, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, they're impressive. I think, this Ridgewood team with Gavin McDonough and what Coach Elder has done to flip this program around, moving into their first year in 8-man, you can see that this move to 8-man was great for them. And actually, I heard a really cool story. WRMJ, Ty Taylor, did the interview with head coach Pat Elder for their Pigskin playoff preview show over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to Coach Elder about, he had been a teacher for a few years and had not been coaching football. Maybe he'd been helping out, but I'm not sure exactly what capacity. But when they made the decision to go to 8-man and they didn't have a head coach at the time, and several of the seniors, incoming senior class, went to Coach Elder and their teacher at the time and asked him, had he considered applying for the job? And he said no, that he hadn't really thought about it. And those seniors said, we would really like it if you did.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, isn't that a really cool story? Like, to know that these kids recognized kind of what he could do for them and their potential. And it's certainly played out on the field now. I love that story, to know that kids were already bought in before they even, had him named as head coach. So very cool story. I think before we wrap up the 8-man talk, we have to talk about Decatur Lutheran, Leighton Miller. His numbers have been ridiculous. He's led Decatur Lutheran this year. And I think when you're talking about the number 1 seed, he may be the best player in 8-man football this year. The question becomes, are they as deep? Do they have as many weapons as, say, the West Central team does? So I think that becomes a question, but that's an intriguing team to follow as well. Yeah. This 8-man division is exciting.
Yeah. I don't know that they have as good of a defense. They haven't been blowing people out the way that West Central has. Decatur Lutheran had that 2-point game against Milledgeville that they won. And then that week 9 game against Milford Cisna Park, which was 54-40, certainly not a close game, but they allowed 40 points. So when you're playing a team like West Central and they're going to have openings like that, that's usually not going to spell, a win for you. So really like the Heat. Excited to see how these playoffs do shake out. Because again, it's not to say that Milledgeville or Amboy, Polo, whomever couldn't come in on one of these weeks, on one of these Fridays or Saturdays, and beat them. Because that's where we are with how good and deep these teams are.
Yeah, the 8-man division has been exciting all year long. I think there's been about 5 different number 1 teams as we go through week by week. So that makes it exciting. This playoffs are going to get really exciting in 8-man, especially once we get into rounds 2 and 3. So, Mitch, that wraps it up. I don't think we have anything more to talk about. This is probably by far our longest episode.
Yeah, I think after editing, it'll be pretty close to 3 hours. So,
gosh.
Yeah, our thanks to everyone who will stick around listening to this episode. If you do, maybe we can timestamp it for a couple different classes if they want to skip ahead to the 1A or whatever it may be. But,
we can help them out.
It's a credit to the teams that we cover that we have so much talent to talk about. It's job security for us. And again, it's exciting. There are teams outside of Lena who we could be talking about for multiple weeks.
Yep.
We give a lot of credit to Lena for good reason, but there are a lot of teams that looking at these brackets, looking at these matchups that we know that we'll be talking about in week 2, and then could have a favorable matchup there and be talking about them in the quarterfinals. So again, credit to the area that we're in. We're very lucky to be in this area and excited for playoff football once again.
Well, Mitch, Morrison, Marquette, may the best team win.
Yep.
And I hope you're ready to sing a fight song next week.
Keep those dreams alive where they'll exist.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who listened. Please follow along this week. We will continue to update, as the scores roll along on Friday and Saturday. We will be active on Twitter, keeping everyone updated on all the scores. We'll maybe find a chance to do an instant reacts. We'll have to see how schedules work out. But,
yeah, I mean, like we said, this is as good of a week to do it because there's a lot of Friday night games. After this week, there won't be very many Friday night games.
That's
so
true.
Could we still do an instant reacts on a Saturday? Yeah, but you might be recapping a game that ended 6 hours prior. Whereas this Friday they'll be fresh like normal. So yeah, we'll figure something out.
Well, maybe we could try to do a Friday night instant reacts this week, and then we'll move along from there. But thank you to everyone who listens. Thank you to everyone who follows along. It's going to be a great week of high school football and a great month of high school football.
Yep.
And we'll be covering all of it. So Mitch, until next week, we will see you. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.